The armed men kicked down Ethan Cole's garage door at midnight, hunting for a rusted car he'd bought for $100. They had guns. He had a wrench and an 8-year-old son sleeping upstairs. Across the street, Billionaire CEO Isabella Laurent watched through her mansion window as the mechanic's entire life shattered in less than 60 seconds. She didn't know that broken car contained a secret worth $50 million, or that saving the man everyone called a fool would cost her everything she'd spent a decade building. This is the story of how a salvage yard wreck, a grieving father, and a woman who'd forgotten how to feel anything real collided into something none of them saw coming. If you want to see how far this journey takes us, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story reaches. The fluorescent lights in Cole's auto repair flickered at 11:47 p.m., casting jagged shadows across the oil-stained concrete floor. Ethan Cole wiped his hands on a rag that had stopped being useful 3 hours ago and stared at the invoice on his desk. $73 for a brake job that should have paid $200, but Mrs. Chen was on a fixed income and her daughter needed rides to physical therapy twice a week. He'd done the math in his head while replacing the rotors. 73 was what she could afford without skipping meals. Dad? Ethan turned to find Noah standing in the doorway between the garage and their small apartment above the shop, wearing pajamas with cartoon dinosaurs that were 2 sizes too small. The kid was 8 years old and already had grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. You're supposed to be asleep, buddy. I heard you walking around. Noah rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. You forgot dinner again. Ethan glanced at the microwave clock. He'd worked straight through the evening without eating. Again. I'll grab something in a minute. Go back to bed. Mom used to make you eat. Noah's voice carried that particular flatness that appeared whenever he mentioned Sarah. It had been 3 years since the accident, but grief didn't operate on a schedule. I know she did. Ethan crossed the garage and crouched down to Noah's level, ignoring the protest from his lower back. 32 years old and his body already felt 50. Tell you what, tomorrow I'll cook us something real, not microwave stuff. Deal? You always say that. Yeah, well, tomorrow I mean it. Noah studied him with those dark eyes that looked exactly like Sarah's, searching for the lie. Whatever he saw must have been enough because he nodded once and shuffled back toward the stairs. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Noah. Ethan waited until he heard the apartment door close before letting out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in his chest since sunrise. The shop was quiet except for the eternal drip of the corner sink and the distant hum of traffic on Route 9. He should have been exhausted. 19-hour days had a way of grinding people down, but his mind wouldn't shut off. Bills stacked up like falling dominoes. Noah needed new clothes. The water heater was making a noise that promised an expensive conversation in the near future. He locked up the front of the shop and headed out the back door, intending to cut through the alley to the convenience store on Maple Street. That's when he saw the lights on at Brennan's salvage yard across the empty lot. Ethan had known Tommy Brennan for 15 years, ever since he'd started apprenticing at the shop Old Man Henderson used to run. Tommy kept irregular hours, but midnight on a Wednesday seemed excessive even for him. The salvage yard was a sprawling graveyard of automotive corpses, rusted chassis, stripped engines, and vehicles that had given up their last breath decades ago. Against his better judgment, Ethan walked across the lot. The gate was open, which was unusual. Tommy was paranoid about theft, even though most of what he had was barely worth stealing. Ethan found him near the back row of vehicles, standing beside a car covered with a tarp. Didn't expect company, Tommy said without turning around. He was 60-something, built like a nail, with hands that could probably crush concrete if properly motivated. Saw your lights. Figured I'd check if everything was all right. Depends on your definition. Tommy finally looked at him, and Ethan noticed the exhaustion carved into his face. Bank's foreclosing. Got 30 days to clear out inventory. Jesus, Tommy. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, join the club of people who are sorry. He kicked at the dirt with his boot. Spent 40 years collecting junk nobody wants. Turns out I was right. Nobody wants it. They stood there in the uncomfortable silence of 2 men who'd both learned that life didn't care about your plans. What's under the tarp? Ethan asked eventually. Tommy's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement if it wasn't so bitter. That's the question, isn't it? Hauled it in 2 weeks ago from an estate sale in Pennsylvania. Old lady died, had it sitting in her garage since the 80s, covered in dust thick enough to plant crops in. You looked at it? Looked at it, yeah. Understanding it is a different problem. Tommy grabbed the corner of the tarp and yanked it off in one motion. The car underneath was a mess. Rust bloomed across the body panels like some kind of automotive disease. The paint, what remained of it, might have been red once, but time had faded it to the color of dried blood. The tires were flat. The windows were so filthy Ethan couldn't see inside. It looked like something that had been dragged from the bottom of a lake and left to rot. What is it? Honestly? No idea. Got some weird modifications I've never seen before. Custom suspension work that probably cost more than the car was worth. But it's too far gone for parts. And I don't have time to sit on it hoping some collector with more money than sense shows up. Ethan walked a slow circle around the vehicle. The body styles suggested early 80s, maybe a European import, but the proportions were wrong, too low, too wide. Someone had spent serious time and money building this thing, and then it had been abandoned like a piece of garbage. How much? The question came out of his mouth before his brain could stop it. Tommy laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. For this? Ethan, you got a family to feed. Don't be stupid. I asked how much. $100 and it's yours. I'll even throw in a tow to your garage, seeing as none of those tires are holding air. $100 was 2 weeks of groceries if he shopped carefully. $100 was two. It was the electric bill. It was the difference between Noah's shoes lasting another month or having to buy new ones. It was completely, absolutely, undeniably stupid to spend it on a rusted wreck that would probably never run again. Deal. Tommy stared at him like he'd just announced plans to fly to the moon, using a bicycle and optimism. You serious? When can you deliver it? Ethan. Tommy, when can you deliver it? The older man shook his head slowly. Tomorrow afternoon work? I got a flatbed I can use. Tomorrow's perfect. Ethan pulled 5 20s from his wallet, money he'd been saving for Noah's birthday next month, and handed them over. The cash disappeared into Tommy's pocket, and just like that, Ethan Cole owned a car that looked like it had lost a fight with time and gravity. Chuck. The neighbors noticed the delivery. Ethan was halfway through an oil change on Mr. Peterson's Honda when he heard the flatbed's engine grinding down the street. He wiped his hands and stepped outside in time to see Tommy backing the truck into the narrow driveway beside the shop. The rusted car sat on the bed like an accusation. Where you want it? Tommy called from the driver's window. Garage bay 2. It's empty. The unloading process drew a small crowd. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down. The Rodriguez family from across the street. Marcus Webb, who ran the barbershop and had opinions about everything, whether you asked for them or not. The hell is that? Marcus asked, his voice carrying that particular tone people used when they wanted everyone to know they thought you were an idiot. Project car, Ethan said. Project? Man, that's not a project. That's a donation to the scrapyard. Hey, good thing I didn't ask your opinion. $100 says it never runs. Marcus grinned like he'd just delivered the world's greatest joke. Actually, forget it. You probably can't afford to lose $100. Ethan felt his jaw tighten, but didn't respond. Tommy got the car positioned in the bay and lowered it off the flatbed with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Once it was settled, he climbed down from the truck and walked over to where Ethan stood. She's all yours. Tommy handed him a manila envelope. Found this stuff in the glove box. Figured you'd want it. What is it? Old registration papers, some handwritten notes I can't read, and what looks like technical drawings. Might be nothing. Might be something. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Good luck, kid. You're gonna need it. The flatbed rumbled away, leaving Ethan standing in his garage bay with a crowd of neighbors who all seemed to have concluded he'd completely lost his mind. Ethan, honey, are you sure about this? Mrs. Henderson's voice carried the careful concern of someone talking to a relative who'd started wearing tinfoil hats. I know money's been tight since Sarah, I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. Thanks for checking. It's just that Noah needs, I know what Noah needs. The words came out sharper than he intended, and he immediately felt guilty. Mrs. Henderson had babysat Noah more times than he could count, always refusing payment. I appreciate your concern, really, but I know what I'm doing. The lie tasted bitter, but he smiled anyway. The crowd eventually dispersed, probably to spread the news that the widowed mechanic had finally cracked under the pressure and was wasting money on garbage. Ethan stood alone in the bay, staring at the car. It looked worse under the fluorescent lights. The rust was deeper than he'd thought. The body panels had dents he hadn't noticed at the salvage yard. The whole thing smelled like mildew and failure. What did you buy? Ethan turned to find Noah standing in the doorway, still wearing his school clothes. The kid must have just gotten off the bus. Car for a project. It looks dead. Yeah, well, sometimes dead things can be fixed. Noah walked closer, tilting his head to study the vehicle from different angles. His expression carried that serious intensity he got when he was trying to puzzle something out. What kind of car is it? Good question. I'm not entirely sure yet. Can I help fix it? Ethan's first instinct was to say no. The car was filthy, probably structurally unsafe, and he had no idea what he'd gotten himself into. But then he saw the light in Noah's eyes, that spark of curiosity that had been increasingly rare since Sarah died. Yeah, buddy, you can help. Really? Really. But homework first, and you have to follow safety rules. Deal? Noah launched himself forward and wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist with enough force to nearly knock him over. Deal. Toy. All right. Go get your homework done and we'll take a look at it after dinner. Noah sprinted toward the apartment stairs with the kind of energy that made Ethan feel ancient by comparison. He waited until the kid was gone before turning back to the car and letting out a long breath. What the hell did I just do? The car didn't answer, which was probably for the best. That night, after microwaved spaghetti and help with math homework that made Ethan question whether he'd ever actually learned division, they stood together in the garage bay. Ethan had dragged over a work lamp and positioned it to illuminate the car's interior. Noah pressed his face against the driver's side window, trying to see through decades of accumulated grime. It's really gross in there, Noah announced. Yeah, that's what happens when nobody takes care of something for 40 years. Why didn't anyone take care of it? I don't know, maybe they forgot about it. Maybe they couldn't afford to. Maybe they just gave up. Noah considered this with the seriousness of a philosophy professor. That's sad. Yeah, it is. But Ethan tried the driver's door. It opened with a shriek of protesting metal that made them both wince. The interior was worse than the exterior. The seats were shredded, with foam guts spilling out like some kind of automotive autopsy. The dashboard was cracked and faded. Everything smelled like rot and disappointment. But underneath the decay, Ethan could see hints of something else. The steering wheel had a custom wrap that was obviously hand-stitched. The dashboard layout was unusual. Gauges positioned in places that didn't match any production car he knew. The gear shifter was short and positioned closer to the wheel than standard. Someone built this thing, he muttered, half to himself. Built it for what? Racing, maybe? Look at how low the seats sit. And see this? He pointed to the roll cage partially visible behind the seats. That's serious safety equipment. This wasn't just some weekend project. Noah climbed into the passenger seat despite Ethan's protest that it probably wasn't safe. The kid ran his hands over the dashboard, tracing patterns in the dust. It has a name, Noah said suddenly. What? The car. It has a name. Noah pointed to something scratched into the dashboard near the passenger airbag. See? Someone wrote it there. Ethan leaned in closer. Sure enough, carved into the plastic and letters that had probably been clear once but were now filled with dirt, was a single word. Phoenix. Huh. Phoenix. Like the bird that comes back from the dead. Well, Noah said with the confidence of someone who'd recently completed a mythology unit at school. Yeah, like that. That's what we should call it. Phoenix. Ethan looked at his son sitting in the ruins of a car that had probably been forgotten before the kid was even born, and something in his chest shifted. This was stupid. He'd wasted money they didn't have. The neighbors thought he was crazy. The car would probably never run. But Noah was smiling for the first time in weeks, and that was worth $100 of anyone's money. Phoenix it is, then. The next morning, Ethan woke at 5:30 to the sound of rain hammering against the apartment windows. He lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the storm and trying to remember if he'd scheduled any jobs that required being outside. Eventually, the growing discomfort of his bladder won the argument, and he dragged himself to the bathroom. By 6, he was standing in the garage with a cup of instant coffee that tasted like regret, staring at Phoenix. The work lamp cast harsh shadows that made the car look even more decrepit. He'd been thinking about it all night, what he knew, what he didn't know, and whether he'd made a massive mistake. The envelope Tommy had given him sat on his workbench. Ethan opened it and spread the contents across the metal surface. Registration papers from 1987 in the name of someone called Martin Voss. A title with multiple transfers and signatures that became increasingly illegible over time. Some photographs that had faded to the point of being nearly useless, showing the car before rust had claimed it, back when it was actually red and looked like something that belonged on a track. And then there were the drawings. Ethan unfolded them carefully, trying not to tear paper that had become brittle with age. They were technical schematics, suspension designs, measurements, notes written in tight handwriting that was hard to read. This wasn't amateur hour stuff. Whoever Martin Voss was, he'd known what he was doing. "You're up early." Ethan turned to find Noah standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, holding the stuffed giraffe he still slept with, even though he claimed he was too old for it. "Couldn't sleep." "What's your excuse?" "The rain's loud." "Yeah, it is." Ethan gestured for Noah to come closer. "Want to see something cool?" They spent the next hour looking at the drawings together. Ethan explained what each part did, or at least his best guess, while Noah asked questions that sometimes Ethan could answer and sometimes he couldn't. The suspension design was unlike anything he'd seen before, with components that seemed over-engineered for a streetcar but might make sense on a track. Someone had spent serious money building this machine. "Why did they stop driving it?" Noah asked eventually. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe they ran out of money. Maybe something happened to the owner. Maybe—" The sound of a car door slamming outside interrupted him. Then voices. Raised, angry. Ethan glanced at the clock. 6:47 in the morning on a Thursday. Who the hell was causing drama at this hour? He walked to the garage door and looked outside. Across the street, in front of the massive modern mansion that had been built 2 years ago, a moving truck was parked. 2 men were unloading furniture while a woman stood on the sidewalk giving directions in a voice that could probably cut glass. Isabella Laurent. Ethan knew who she was because everyone in town knew who she was. 30-year-old CEO of some tech company that had made her obscenely rich. She'd bought the Mercer property and torn down the old colonial house that had been there for 100 years, replacing it with a steel and glass monument to excess. The neighbors had fought the construction for months, but money talked louder than people who'd lived on the street for decades. She was tall, wearing clothes that probably cost more than Ethan made in a month, with dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but probably required a team of professionals. Everything about her screamed wealth and power, and a complete disconnect from the reality of people who had to worry about electric bills. "Is that the mean lady?" Noah had appeared beside him. "She's not mean, she's just—" Ethan paused, trying to find a word that was appropriate for an 8-year-old. "Different. She told Marcus his music was too loud and she'd have him arrested for disturbing her peace." "When did that happen?" "Last month. Marcus said she could take her piece and—" Noah stopped, clearly remembering that he probably shouldn't repeat whatever Marcus had said. Ethan stifled a laugh. "Yeah, well, let's just stay out of her way." "What are mamso kishe?" As if summoned by this conversation, Isabella Laurent's gaze swept across the street and landed directly on them. For a moment, they made eye contact across 50 feet of asphalt and social stratification. Her expression didn't change, cool, assessing, completely unimpressed by whatever she saw. Then her attention shifted to Phoenix, still visible in the open garage bay, and Ethan watched something like disdain flicker across her face. She turned away without acknowledgement, directing the movers with sharp gestures that suggested she was used to people following orders. "Come on, Noah, let's get you ready for school." "Can we work on Phoenix tonight?" "Yeah, we can work on Phoenix tonight." "Well," they headed back inside, leaving the garage door open to ventilate the space. Behind them, Isabella Laurent's voice carried on the morning air, giving instructions to people who were paid to care about her opinions. Ethan didn't look back. He had his own problems to worry about, and rich neighbors who thought everyone else was beneath them didn't make the list. The week developed a rhythm. Ethan worked his regular jobs during the day, brake replacements, oil changes, the occasional diagnostic that actually required some thinking. At night, after Noah finished homework and ate dinner, they'd spend 2 or 3 hours in the garage working on Phoenix. The first night was just cleaning. They hauled out decades of accumulated trash, fast food wrappers that had probably been left there in the Reagan administration, mysterious stains that neither of them wanted to identify, and enough dead insects to start a biology lesson. Noah complained that it smelled like something died, which was probably accurate. "This is the boring part," Ethan explained while scrubbing mold off the door panels. "But you can't fix a car if you don't know what you're dealing with. We need to see what's actually there under all this mess." "How long will it take? To clean? A while? To fix?" "Honestly, buddy, I have no idea. This isn't like the cars we normally work on. Someone custom built this thing." "Is that good?" "Could be. Could also be a nightmare." By Friday night, they'd removed enough grime to actually see what they were working with. The interior was shot. They'd need to replace basically everything. The exterior body panels had rust damage that would require serious work or replacement parts that probably didn't exist anymore. But underneath the decay, Ethan started seeing things that didn't make sense. The frame was reinforced in unusual places. The suspension mounting points had been modified with hand-fabricated brackets. The exhaust system routing suggested someone had installed a significantly larger engine than the car was originally designed for. Every new discovery raised more questions. "Dad?" Noah's voice pulled him back from where he'd been crouched beside the rear wheel well, trying to figure out why someone had welded additional metal to the chassis. "Yeah? Why did you really buy this car?" Ethan sat back on his heels, considering the question. He could give Noah the easy answer, that it was a good deal, that he liked a challenge, that it would be fun to work on together. But his son deserved better than easy answers. "You know how sometimes things feel right even when they don't make sense?" Noah nodded slowly. "This felt right. I don't know why. I can't explain it. But when I saw it sitting in Tommy's yard, something in my gut said I was supposed to take it home." "Well..." He paused, searching for better words. "Your mom used to say that life puts things in front of you for a reason. Sometimes the reason doesn't show up until later, but it's there. Do you miss her?" The question was quiet, almost hesitant. "Every single day, buddy. Every single day." They sat together in the garage silence, surrounded by tools and rust and the ghosts of whatever Phoenix used to be. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of traffic and someone's dog barking. Normal life continuing like nothing had changed, even though everything had. "I think Mom would like that we're doing this," Noah said eventually. Ethan felt something catch in his throat. "Yeah, I think she would too." Saturday morning brought Marcus Webb to the garage door with coffee and his usual commentary. "You're actually serious about this thing?" It wasn't a question. "Seems that way." Ethan accepted the coffee. Marcus brought good stuff from the shop downtown, not the instant garbage Ethan survived on. "Man, you're crazier than I thought." Marcus walked a slow circle around Phoenix, shaking his head. "What's your plan here? You gonna get it running and flip it?" "Haven't thought that far ahead." "Chom, haven't thought. Because I got a cousin in the city who deals in classic cars. Might be able to connect you if you're looking to sell." "Not looking to sell? So what then? You just bought a $100 paperweight for fun. What Mota." Ethan took a long drink of coffee to give himself time to think of an answer that wouldn't sound completely insane. The truth was, he didn't have a plan. He was operating on instinct and the vague feeling that Phoenix was important somehow. But saying that out loud made him sound like someone who'd lost touch with reality. "It's a project for me and Noah," he said finally. "Something we can work on together." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, all right. I can respect that." He gestured toward the technical drawings spread across the workbench. What's all that? Came with the car. Original owner's notes, I think. Guy who built this thing really knew what he was doing. Built it for what? That's the question I can't answer yet. They stood together drinking coffee while morning sunlight crept across the garage floor. Marcus was one of the few people in town who'd known Sarah, had come to the funeral, had checked in regularly during those first brutal months after the accident. His commentary could be harsh, but it came from a place of actual concern rather than judgment. You eating okay? Marcus asked suddenly. What? You look like hell, man. When's the last time you had a real meal? I eat. Microwave dinners and gas station coffee don't count. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm texting you my wife's number. She cooks enough to feed an army every Sunday. You and Noah are coming over tomorrow. No arguments. Marcus, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm doing it anyway. Jasmine's been asking about Noah, and I'm tired of making excuses for why you won't let people help. Ethan wanted to protest, to maintain the independence he'd been clinging to like a life raft. But the truth was he was exhausted. Noah was living on a diet that would horrify any nutritionist, and pride was a poor substitute for community. What time Sunday? 2:00. Bring your appetite and that boy of yours. Marcus drained his coffee and headed for the door, then paused. And Ethan? Whatever you're doing with this car, whatever reason you can't explain, I hope you find it. You deserve something good. He left before Ethan could figure out how to respond to that. The weekend passed in a blur of work. Ethan had 3 paying jobs that couldn't wait. Mrs. Rodriguez's transmission was grinding. The Peterson kid had backed into a mailbox and needed bodywork before his parents found out. And someone's check engine light that turned out to be a loose gas cap, but still took 20 minutes to diagnose. Between the actual work that paid bills, he stole hours with Phoenix. Noah helped when he wasn't at his friend Jason's house or working through reading assignments for school. They pulled the seats out completely, revealing more custom modifications underneath. The floor pans had been reinforced with additional metal, and someone had installed mounting points for a racing harness system that was long gone. This was definitely a race car, Ethan muttered while examining the reinforcement work. But why would someone build a custom race car and then just abandon it? Maybe they died, Noah offered cheerfully, with the casual approach to mortality that only children could manage. Maybe. Or maybe something happened that made them stop racing. Ethan took photos of everything with his phone, then spent Saturday evening researching. He ran searches for Martin Voss, the name on the registration, but found nothing useful. The internet was full of people with that name, none of whom seemed to be connected to custom race cars from the 80s. He tried searching based on the car's characteristics. Custom build, European styling, 1980s era. But came up empty. The technical drawings kept pulling his attention back. They were too detailed to be amateur work. Whoever had designed Phoenix had engineering knowledge that suggested formal education or serious experience. But why would someone with that kind of skill waste it building a one-off race car that nobody had ever heard of? Sunday afternoon, Ethan and Noah walked 3 blocks to Marcus and Jasmine's house, bringing nothing because they didn't have anything worth bringing. Jasmine answered the door with a hug that nearly crushed Noah, and knowing look at Ethan that suggested Marcus had briefed her on the situation. "You're too skinny," she announced, which seemed to be her standard greeting for anyone who showed up. "Both of you, get inside." The house smelled like home cooking and comfort. Jasmine had made enough food to feed 20 people. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, 3 different vegetables, and a pie that was still cooling on the counter. Noah's eyes went wide with the kind of awe usually reserved for Christmas morning. "Can I really eat as much as I want?" "Baby, you can eat until you pop," Jasmine said, already loading a plate. "Your daddy, too." "It's sure, what? Is it why?" They sat around the dining room table, Marcus, Jasmine, their teenage daughter Keisha, who spent most of dinner texting, Noah, who ate like he'd never seen food before, and Ethan, who realized about halfway through the meal that he couldn't remember the last time he'd sat at an actual table with other people. "So Marcus tells me you bought a car," Jasmine said while passing the potatoes. "More like a wreck with delusions of being a car." He says it's for a project with Noah. That's the plan. I think it's nice. Boys need projects with their fathers. She gave Marcus a pointed look. Some fathers could stand to do more projects with their sons instead of spending every Sunday watching football. Hey now, Marcus started, but Jasmine cut him off with a gesture that suggested this was an ongoing argument. Noah, who had been quietly demolishing his second plate of food, suddenly spoke up. It's called Phoenix. We're going to fix it together and make it run again. Phoenix? Keisha looked up from her phone for the first time all meal. That's actually kind of cool. You think so? Noah's face lit up with the validation. Yeah, like it's coming back from being dead or whatever. Mythology is fire. The conversation drifted to other topics. Keisha's upcoming college applications, Marcus's frustration with property taxes, Jasmine's concerns about the new shopping development threatening the downtown businesses. Ethan let it wash over him, content to just exist in the warmth of other people's lives for a few hours. After dinner, while Noah and Keisha played some video game in the living room, Marcus pulled Ethan onto the back porch. You doing all right? Marcus asked, handing him a beer. Actually all right, not the automatic response you give everyone. Ethan considered lying, then decided against it. Most days I don't know. I get up, I work, I take care of Noah, I fall into bed exhausted, and then I do it again. The car is the first thing in 3 years that's felt like it might be something other than survival. That's good, man. You need something that's yours. Yeah, well, half the neighborhood thinks I've lost my mind. Half the neighborhood can mind their own business. Marcus took a long drink of his beer. You know who was asking about it? Who? The ice queen across the street, Isabella Laurent. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. What about it? Oh, came into the shop Friday for a haircut. First time she's ever stepped foot in my place, probably slumming it for the experience or whatever. Jasmine was there, and she mentioned you bought a project car. Laurent got this look on her face like she'd just smelled something bad and said it was typical that people in the neighborhood didn't understand the value of maintaining property standards. Property standards. Her words, not mine. Jasmine told her where she could stick her property standards, and Laurent hasn't been back since. Ethan shouldn't have cared what Isabella Laurent thought. Shouldn't. She was a stranger who'd bought her way into a community she clearly felt was beneath her. Her opinion meant nothing, but there was something grating about the dismissal. The casual assumption that anyone working with their hands was somehow less than. She's got her world, we've got ours, Marcus said, reading his thoughts. Don't let it get under your skin. I'm not. You're gripping that beer bottle like you're trying to choke it. Ethan forced his hand to relax. She doesn't know anything about me or what I'm doing. Nope. And she never will, because people like that don't bother learning about people like us. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Forget about her. Focus on your kid and your project. That's what matters. They finished their beers in comfortable silence while the sun set behind the row houses and the streetlights flickered on. Inside, they could hear Noah laughing at something Keisha said. It was a good sound. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his son laugh like that. Monday brought reality back with the subtlety of a hammer. Ethan had 4 jobs scheduled, Noah had a dental appointment at 3:30, and the water heater finally gave up its fight with mortality and died completely. By the time evening rolled around, Ethan was exhausted, broke, and seriously questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. Can we work on Phoenix? Noah asked during dinner. Microwave mac and cheese because the grocery run would have to wait until tomorrow. Not tonight, buddy. I've got to figure out this water heater situation. But you promised we'd work on it every night. I said we'd work on it when we could. Tonight we can't. Noah's face fell into that particular expression of disappointment that made Ethan feel like he'd failed at the one job that actually mattered. You always say that. Noah. It's fine. Whatever. Noah pushed away from the table and headed for his room, leaving Ethan sitting alone with cheap pasta and the growing suspicion that he was screwing up everything. He gave Noah 20 minutes to cool off, then knocked on the bedroom door. Go away. Not how this works, buddy. We need to talk. Silence, but not the kind that meant go away. Silence, but more the kind that meant I'm listening, but I'm still mad. Ethan took it as permission and opened the door. Noah was sitting on his bed, holding the stuffed giraffe and staring at the wall with the intensity of someone trying not to cry. Ethan sat down beside him, close enough to be present, but not so close that it felt smothering. "I'm sorry about tonight," Ethan said quietly. "You're always sorry, but you're always too busy." You're right. I am too busy. And I'm sorry about that too. He took a breath, trying to find words that were honest but wouldn't dump adult problems onto a kid. You know how sometimes there aren't enough hours in the day for everything? That's because you work too much. I work a lot because we need money for things like food and electricity and doctor visits. But you're right that I work too much. I know I do. Mom never worked this much. The statement hung between them, loaded with implications that an 8-year-old couldn't fully articulate, but felt nonetheless. Sarah had worked part-time at the library, managing their family life with the kind of organizational skill that had always amazed Ethan. She'd made it look easy, even though he knew now that it absolutely wasn't. Your mom was better at balancing things than I am, Ethan admitted. She was better at a lot of things than I am. I'm doing my best, but my best isn't always enough. I miss her. Noah's voice cracked on the words. I know, buddy. I miss her too. Every single day. They sat together in the quiet of Noah's room, surrounded by toys that were mostly hand-me-downs and furniture they'd bought used because new wasn't in the budget. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Car doors, voices, the distant wail of a siren. Tell you what, Ethan said eventually. Tomorrow I'll make time for Phoenix. Real time. Not just an hour when we're both exhausted. We'll order pizza, and we'll spend the whole evening working on it together. Deal? Noah studied him with those dark eyes that missed nothing. Promise? Promise. Okay. Noah leaned against him, still holding the giraffe. Can you tell me about when you and Mom got married? So Ethan did. He told stories about the courthouse wedding they'd planned in 3 weeks because they were young and broke and didn't want to wait. He talked about Sarah's dress that she'd bought at a thrift store and somehow made look like it cost a fortune. He described their honeymoon camping trip where it had rained the entire time, but they'd laughed themselves sick trying to cook hot dogs over a soggy campfire. By the time he finished, Noah was half asleep, still holding the giraffe, but breathing with the deep rhythm of someone who'd found peace. Ethan carefully extracted himself from the bed, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his son sleep. He'd meant what he told Marcus. Phoenix was the first thing in 3 years that felt like more than just survival. But looking at Noah now, Ethan realized the car wasn't really about him. It was about creating something good for his son to hold on to, some project they could share that wasn't tainted by grief or financial stress or the constant weight of things falling apart. Tomorrow, he'd make time. Tomorrow they'd work on bringing Phoenix back to life. Tomorrow had to be better than today. Tuesday started with a phone call at 6 in the morning. Ethan grabbed it on the second ring, his mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios because good news never came before sunrise. Ethan Cole? The voice was unfamiliar, professional, with an accent he couldn't quite place. Who's this? My name is David Chen. I'm a collector of rare vehicles, and I was told you recently acquired a car from Brennan's Salvage. Is that correct? Right, Neds. Ethan's brain was still half asleep, struggling to keep up. How did you get my number? Tommy Brennan provided it. I apologize for calling so early, but I'm in town for limited time and I'm very interested in your purchase. Would you be willing to meet? Meet about what? About the car you bought. I believe it may be significantly more valuable than you realize. That woke Ethan up completely. He sat upright in bed, suddenly alert. What makes you think that? I'd rather discuss it in person, if you're willing. I can stop by your shop this morning. Say, 9 o'clock? Ethan's instinct was to say no, to protect Phoenix from whatever this was. But curiosity won out. 9 works. Cole's Auto Repair on Maple Street. Excellent. I'll see you then. Yeshi. The line went dead before Ethan could ask any more questions. He sat in bed for another minute, trying to process what had just happened, then gave up and got up to start coffee. By the time Noah shuffled into the kitchen at 7, Ethan had already consumed 2 cups and was working on a third. "You look weird," Noah observed with the blunt honesty of children everywhere. "Weird how?" "Weird like you're thinking too hard about something." "Just got a strange phone call. Guy wants to come look at Phoenix." Noah's eyes went wide. "Why?" "Says it might be valuable. I don't know what that means yet." "Are you going to sell it?" No. The answer came out faster than Ethan expected, surprising him with its certainty. "No, we're not selling it, but I want to know what this guy knows." They got through the morning routine was breakfast, backpack check, walking Noah to the bus stop. Marcus waved from his shop entrance across the street, and Mrs. Henderson called out that she had extra tomatoes from her garden if Ethan wanted them. Normal life, continuing like clockwork, even while Ethan's mind raced with questions about what a car collector might want with a rusted wreck. At 8:50, a black luxury sedan pulled up in front of the shop. The man who got out was maybe 45, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Ethan made in a month, and carrying a leather briefcase that screamed money. He approached the shop entrance with the confidence of someone used to being taken seriously. "Ethan Cole? That's me. David Chen, thank you for seeing me on short notice." They shook hands, and Chen's grip was firm but not aggressive. "Is the car here?" "Garage Bay 2. Follow me." Ethan led him through the shop to where Phoenix sat under the fluorescent lights. He'd cleaned up a bit the night before, but the car still looked like exactly what it was, a rusted wreck that someone had abandoned decades ago. Chen approached slowly, his expression shifting from professional interest to something that looked almost like awe. "My God," he breathed. "It's actually real." "You know what it is?" Chen didn't answer immediately. He walked a complete circle around the car, occasionally crouching to examine specific details. The suspension mounting points, the modified chassis, the hand-fabricated brackets. His hands moved over the metal with the reverence of someone handling something sacred. "Where did you find this?" he asked finally. "Salvage yard. It came from an estate sale in Pennsylvania." "Do you have any documentation, registration, original paperwork, anything?" Ethan retrieved the manila envelope from his workbench and handed it over. Chen opened it carefully and pulled out the registration papers, his eyes scanning the text with an intensity that made Ethan uncomfortable. "Martin Voss," Chen read aloud. "Do you know who that is?" "Should I? Should. In certain circles, yes." Chen set the papers down and turned to face Ethan directly. In the early 1980s, Martin Voss was one of the most brilliant automotive engineers on the East Coast. He worked for several major manufacturers before going independent. There were rumors he was developing a revolutionary racing platform, something that would change the entire industry. "What happened?" He disappeared, 1987. There were theories. Some people thought he'd been poached by a European manufacturer. Others claimed he'd burned out and walked away from the industry completely. But there were always whispers about a prototype, a car he'd built entirely on his own that contained engineering advances years ahead of its time. Chen gestured to Phoenix with something like reverence. Most collectors assumed it was legend, a story that got better with every retelling. But if this is what I think it is, if this is actually Martin Voss's prototype, then you're sitting on one of the most significant automotive discoveries in decades. Ethan felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "You're saying this wreck is famous?" "Not famous. Mythical. There's a difference." Chen pulled out his phone and showed Ethan a web page, some collector forum where enthusiasts were discussing rare vehicles. "See this thread? 17 pages of people debating whether the Voss prototype ever existed. Some claim they've seen photographs. Others say it's an urban legend. Nobody has ever produced actual proof. Until now. Until now." Chen's expression shifted into something more businesslike. "Which brings me to why I'm here. I'd like to buy it from you. It's not for sale." I understand you might be attached to it, but let's be realistic. You're a small shop owner with limited resources. Restoring a vehicle like this properly would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly more. I can offer you $25,000 right now, cash, for the car exactly as it sits. $25,000. The number hit Ethan like a physical blow. That was 2 years of breathing room. That was Noah's education fund. That was every financial stress he carried, disappearing overnight. I need to think about it, he heard himself say. Chen reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. Of course. Take your time. But Mr. Cole, I should mention, if word gets out about what you have, you'll be contacted by other collectors. Some of them won't be as polite as I am. This car represents a significant historical discovery. There are people who would do quite a lot to acquire it. Is that a threat? It's a warning from someone who's been in this business long enough to know how people behave when they want something badly enough. Chen handed over the card. Call me when you've decided. The offer stands for 48 hours. He left the same way he'd arrived, smoothly, professionally, like someone who was used to making offers and waiting for people to accept them. Ethan stood alone in the garage bay, holding a business card and trying to process what had just happened. Phoenix wasn't just a project car, it was a piece of automotive history, a prototype that engineers and collectors had spent decades arguing about, assuming it was myth, never expecting it would turn up rusted and forgotten in a salvage yard. $25,000. Ethan looked at the car, at Phoenix, because that's what Noah had named it, and names mattered, and tried to imagine watching it get loaded onto a truck and driven away. The number was smart. The number was responsible. The number was everything he needed to make life easier. But Noah's voice echoed in his memory, like the bird that comes back from the dead. What the hell did we get ourselves into? Ethan asked the empty garage. Phoenix didn't answer. But somewhere in the back of Ethan's mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Sarah's whispered that the right answer wasn't always the easy one. He had 48 hours to decide what that meant. The business card sat on Ethan's workbench for 2 hours before he finally picked it up again. David Chen, Automotive Historical Acquisitions. A phone number with a New York area code. $25,000 for a car he'd bought for $100. The rational part of his brain kept running the numbers. That money would change everything. New water heater, Noah's college fund, breathing room for the first time in 3 years. He could stop working 19-hour days. He could actually take his son somewhere that wasn't the grocery store or the dentist. But every time he started reaching for his phone, something stopped him. At noon, Marcus showed up with sandwiches from the deli and an expression that said he'd already heard the news. So a collector came by this morning. Marcus unwrapped his sandwich and leaned against the workbench. Mrs. Henderson saw the fancy car. Whole streets talking. Of course they are. Word is you got offered serious money. Ethan took a bite of his sandwich to buy time. The bread was dry, but Marcus meant well. 25,000. Marcus whistled low. Damn, that's real money. Yeah. You taking it? I don't know. What's there to know? You bought it for $100. That's a 250 times return on investment. People build entire careers hoping for numbers like that. Ethan set down his sandwich, suddenly not hungry. Noah named it Phoenix. We've been working on it together every night. It's the first thing since Sarah died that's felt like something other than just surviving. Spasai es dishi. Man, I get that. I do. But $25,000 would do a hell of a lot more for Noah than a rusted car that might never run. You sound like you're trying to convince me to sell. I'm trying to convince you to think practically. Marcus's voice carried concern, not judgment. You got a chance to set your family up. That doesn't come around often for people like us. People like us. The phrase hung in the air between them. Marcus meant working-class folks who fixed things with their hands and counted pennies at the grocery store. People who didn't have safety nets or trust funds, or the luxury of making decisions based on feelings instead of mathematics. What would you do? Ethan asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, chewing thoughtfully. Honestly, I'd probably sell. But I'm not you, and it's not my call to make. They finished their sandwiches in silence while Ethan's mind spun in circles. By the time Marcus left, Ethan was no closer to a decision than he'd been that morning. At 3:30, Noah burst through the garage door with the explosive energy of a kid freed from school, already talking before he'd fully entered the room. Dad, Jason's mom said there's a guy at school asking about old cars, and someone told him about Phoenix, and Jason says the guy showed up at the principal's office trying to get your phone number, but they wouldn't give it to him because that's weird, and slow down, buddy. Breathe. Noah sucked in air and tried again. Someone's looking for Phoenix. Yeah, I know. A collector came by this morning. Jason's mom said he looked sketchy. How would Jason's mom know what he looked like? She volunteers in the front office on Tuesdays. Noah dropped his backpack and ran to Phoenix, placing both hands on the hood like he was protecting it. You didn't sell it, did you? No, I didn't sell it. Are you going to? The question hit harder than it should have. Ethan looked at his son standing guard over a rusted wreck that most people would consider worthless, and something in his chest tightened. I don't know yet. The man offered us a lot of money. How much? Ethan hesitated, unsure if specific numbers would help or hurt. Enough to fix a lot of problems we have. Noah's expression shifted through several emotions too fast to track. Understanding, disappointment, resignation. So you're going to sell it? I said I don't know yet, but you're thinking about it. Noah, it's fine. I get it. We need money. The kid's voice had gone flat, emotionless. You should sell it. Hey, look at me. Ethan crossed the garage and crouched down to Noah's level. This isn't just my decision. Phoenix is ours. We're in this together. You're the adult. Adults make the decisions. Yeah, well, this adult is asking what you think we should do. Noah stared at him, searching for the trap. When he didn't find one, his lower lip started trembling. I don't want to sell it, but I don't want you to work all the time anymore either. And I heard you on the phone with the electric company last week saying we needed more time to pay. The fact that Noah had heard that conversation made Ethan want to punch something. 8-year-olds shouldn't have to worry about electric bills. They should worry about homework and making friends, and whether they get picked for dodgeball. You let me worry about the bills, okay? That's not your job. But if Phoenix money would help, Noah, listen to me. We're not starving. We have a roof over our heads. Yeah, money's tight, but we're making it work. The question isn't whether we need the money. The question is whether selling Phoenix is the right choice for us. What does that mean? Ethan struggled to put complicated feelings into words an 8-year-old could understand. Sometimes the most valuable thing isn't the one worth the most money. Does that make sense? Noah thought about it, then nodded slowly. Like how mom's wedding ring isn't expensive, but you'd never sell it. Exactly like that. They stood together in the garage while afternoon light slanted through the windows and dust motes drifted in the air. Outside, someone's car alarm went off, then stopped. Life continuing its messy forward motion regardless of whether they were ready. Can we still work on it tonight? Noah asked quietly. Even if we might sell it? Yeah, buddy, we can still work on it tonight. That evening, they ordered pizza like Ethan had promised and spent 3 hours in the garage. They pulled out the old exhaust system, which came apart in their hands like it was made of rust, held together by wishful thinking. Underneath, they found more evidence of Phoenix's racing past. Heat shielding that was far more sophisticated than anything a streetcar would need, mounting brackets for what must have been a custom exhaust setup, and more of those mysterious symbols carved into the metal. What are these? Noah traced one with his finger, a circle with intersecting lines that looked almost like a compass rose. I don't know, some kind of maker's mark maybe? A signature? It looks like a logo. Ethan pulled out his phone and took pictures of the symbols, making a mental note to research them later. Every new discovery raised more questions about Martin Voss and what he'd been trying to build. Around 8 o'clock, Noah started yawning despite his protests that he wasn't tired. Ethan sent him upstairs to get ready for bed, promising to come up in a few minutes to say goodnight. Once the kid was gone, Ethan stood alone in the garage staring at Phoenix. $25,000. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole, this is David Chen, just checking if you've had time to consider my offer. Several other parties have expressed interest. I'd hate for you to miss this opportunity. The pressure was subtle but unmistakable. Other parties, missing opportunities, the unspoken suggestion that waiting might cost him. Ethan typed out a response. Still thinking, need more time. The reply came within seconds. Of course. But I should mention I received a call this afternoon from someone claiming to represent the Voss estate. They're questioning the legal ownership of the vehicle. Might be worth selling before that becomes complicated. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Was that a legitimate warning or a manipulation tactic? He had the title. The car was legally his. But legal battles cost money he didn't have. Another text appeared. Think about your son. This money could change his life. That crossed a line. Ethan blocked the number and shoved his phone in his pocket, suddenly angry at David Chen for weaponizing Noah, at himself for even considering the offer, at the universe for making everything so impossibly complicated. He locked up the garage and headed upstairs to find Noah already in bed, holding the giraffe and fighting sleep. "Dad? Yeah, buddy? Are you mad at me for not wanting to sell Phoenix?" "What? No, why would you think that?" "Because you look stressed at dinner, and you always look stressed when we don't have enough money." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of every parenting mistake he'd made in the past 3 years. "I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at anyone. I'm just trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. Mom used to say the right thing is usually the hard thing." Yeah, she did say that. Sarah had been full of wisdom that sounded simple, but turned out to be devastatingly accurate when applied to real life. She was pretty smart, your mom. I wish she was here to tell us what to do. Me too, buddy. Me too. Huh. Ethan stayed until Noah fell asleep, then retreated to his own room where he lay awake until 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and trying to quiet his mind. Somewhere around 3, he finally drifted off into restless dreams about cars that transformed into birds and burned into ash. The next morning started with another phone call, this time from a woman with a crisp Boston accent. "Mr. Cole, my name is Patricia Winters. I represent the estate of Martin Voss." Ethan, who'd been in the middle of his first coffee, went immediately alert. "What can I do for you, Ms. Winters?" "I understand you recently acquired a vehicle that may have belonged to Mr. Voss. I'd like to discuss the circumstances of that acquisition. I bought it legally from a salvage yard. I have the title." "I'm sure you do. However, the Voss estate maintains that certain properties were removed from Martin Voss's possession under questionable circumstances in 1987. We're in the process of recovering those items." "So you're saying the car was stolen?" "I'm saying the chain of ownership is unclear, and we'd like to resolve this matter amicably. Would you be willing to meet?" Every instinct Ethan had screamed that this was wrong. The timing was too convenient, happening right after David Chen's offer. "I'm going to need to consult with a lawyer before I agree to anything." "Of course. That's very prudent." Patricia Winters' voice was smooth, professional, completely reasonable. "Perhaps you should also know that Mr. Chen contacted us yesterday offering to facilitate the return of the vehicle to the estate. We declined, preferring to work directly with you." "How generous of you. Mr. Cole, I understand you're skeptical, but I assure you our interest is in preserving Martin Voss's legacy, not in causing problems for a working father trying to make ends meet." The last part carried just enough emphasis to make it clear she knew exactly who Ethan was and what his situation looked like. "We're prepared to make this worth your while." Meaning we'd be willing to pay fair market value for the vehicle's return. Significantly more than Mr. Chen offered, I might add. Ethan felt like he was standing in quicksand, every movement pulling him deeper. "How much more?" $50,000? Cash? No questions asked. The number hit like a physical blow. 50,000. That wasn't just breathing room. That was security. That was Noah's entire future changing overnight. "I need time to think." "What?" "Take all the time you need. But Mr. Cole, be careful who you trust. There are people interested in that car who don't have your best interests at heart." She hung up before he could respond, leaving Ethan standing in his kitchen with cold coffee and a growing sense that he'd stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple restoration project. He called Marcus. "You get any weird calls this morning?" Ethan asked without preamble. "Define weird." Someone claiming to represent Martin Voss's estate, offering me 50,000 for Phoenix." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. 50,000? "Yeah. Man, what the hell did you actually buy?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Ethan paced his small kitchen, nervous energy needing an outlet. Something's wrong here. First Chen shows up with 25. Then someone shows up at Noah's school asking questions. Now this Winters woman with 50. It's only been 2 days. Osiris. Yesides. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking if people are this desperate to buy it, maybe I should figure out why before I sell anything to anyone. Or, Marcus said carefully, maybe you should take the money before the price goes back down. You really think I should sell? I think you should protect yourself and your kid. If there's some kind of legal dispute about ownership, you don't want to be caught in the middle of that. Sell it, take the money, walk away clean. It was solid advice, practical, smart, everything Ethan should probably do. I'll think about it, he said, and ended the call before Marcus could argue further. At noon, Mrs. Henderson knocked on the garage door with a casserole dish and a concerned expression. I made too much lasagna, again. She handed over the dish, which was still warm. You and Noah should eat it before it goes bad. Mrs. Henderson, you didn't make too much. You made extra on purpose. Well, maybe I did. Are you going to stand there arguing, or are you going to accept help when it's offered? Ethan took the lasagna. Thank you. You're welcome. She didn't leave immediately, hovering in the doorway like she had more to say. There's a man parked across the street. Has been since this morning. Sitting in a gray sedan, watching your shop. Ethan's stomach dropped. You sure? I've lived on this street for 43 years. I know when someone doesn't belong. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried steel underneath the grandmother's sweetness. I already called the police non-emergency line. They said they'd send someone by. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Now eat that lasagna and stop being stupid about this car situation. But she left before Ethan could ask what she meant by that. He set the casserole inside and walked to the front of the shop, peering through the window. Sure enough, there was a gray sedan parked across the street with a man sitting in the driver's seat, apparently absorbed in his phone. But the angle was wrong. He was watching the shop through the side mirror. Ethan's phone rang. Another unknown number. What? He answered, not bothering with pleasantries. Mr. Cole, we need to talk about the situation you've created. The voice was male, older, with an edge that suggested he was used to being listened to. Who is this? My name isn't important. What's important is that you understand you're in possession of property that doesn't belong to you. I have a legal title. Legal doesn't mean legitimate. That car contains technology that was developed under contract to parties who still hold intellectual property rights. By refusing to turn it over, you're committing theft. Ethan felt anger spike through his chest. I bought a car from a salvage yard. Whatever technology is in it came with the purchase. If someone has a problem with that, they can take it up with the legal system. The legal system is slow and expensive, Mr. Cole. Wouldn't it be easier to resolve this now? Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. You're a single father with limited resources. Court battles take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, all while you're trying to raise a child and run a failing business. The man's voice was cold, clinical. We're offering you a way out. Take it. And if I don't, well, then we'll take other measures to recover what belongs to us. I'd hate for things to become unpleasant, but I'm authorized to use whatever methods are necessary. The line went dead. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. This wasn't collectors anymore. This was something else entirely, something dangerous. He called Tommy Brennan. Tommy, where did you say you got Phoenix? Estate sale in Pennsylvania. Why? You remember the address? Not off the top of my head. Might have it in my files if you give me a minute. The sound of papers shuffling came through the phone. You all right, Ethan? You sound stressed. Someone just threatened me over this car. Threatened you how? Called and said if I don't turn it over, they'll take other measures, whatever that means. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Listen, I'm going to level with you. After I sold you that car, I got 3 calls from people wanting to know where it went. I didn't tell them anything, but they were persistent as hell. Kept saying it was important for historical reasons. Why didn't you tell me? Because I figured you'd already bought it and the calls would stop. They didn't stop, did they? No, they got worse. More shuffling papers. Found it. Address was 847 Maple Grove Lane, Harrisburg. Estate belonged to a woman named Eleanor Voss. Died at 89, no surviving family. The auction house was clearing everything out. Voss? So she was related to Martin? Assume so, but I never confirmed. Ethan, if people are threatening you over this thing, maybe you should just sell it and walk away. Whatever's going on, it ain't worth getting hurt over. Yeah, maybe. Ethan thanked him and hung up, then immediately searched for Eleanor Voss in Harrisburg. The obituary was sparse. Beloved member of the community, preceded in death by her husband, no children. Services were private. In lieu of flowers, donations to the local library. No mention of Martin Voss anywhere. Ethan pulled out the manila envelope and studied the registration papers again. Martin Voss, 1987. Then a transfer in 1989 to Eleanor Voss. Then nothing until 2024 when the estate sold it to Tommy Brennan. What had happened in 1987 that made Martin disappear and the car end up with Eleanor? And why did people care enough decades later to start making threats? His phone buzzed. A text from a number he'd blocked yesterday. David Chen had found a way around it. Mr. Cole, I'm hearing concerning rumors about other parties approaching you aggressively. For your safety and your son's, I strongly recommend you accept my original offer and let me handle the situation. I can protect you in ways you can't protect yourself. Ethan stared at the message, trying to separate genuine concern from manipulation. The problem was, he had no idea which was which anymore. That afternoon, when Noah got home from school, Ethan sat him down for a conversation he didn't want to have. Something's happened with Phoenix, something complicated. Noah's eyes went wide. What? There are people who want to buy it, a lot of people, and some of them are being pushy about it. Pushy how? Making phone calls, showing up, watching the shop. Ethan tried to keep his voice calm, not wanting to scare his son, but needing him to understand the situation. I don't think anyone's going to hurt us, but I need you to be careful. Don't talk to strangers about the car. If anyone approaches you at school, you tell a teacher immediately, okay? You're scaring me. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need you to take this seriously. Us. Noah nodded slowly, his earlier excitement about Phoenix completely gone. Why do they want it so bad? Because it might be more special than we thought, more important. And when things are important, people get greedy. Are we going to sell it now? Ethan looked at his son and saw fear there, mixed with resignation. The kid had already lost his mother. Now he was preparing to lose something else he cared about, because adults were making things complicated and scary. No, Ethan heard himself say. No, we're not selling it. But the money, forget the money. This is ours. We found it, we named it, we're fixing it, and I'm not letting anyone bully us into giving that up. The declaration felt reckless, even as the words left his mouth. He had no idea what he was doing. People were threatening him. He couldn't afford a lawyer. He had a kid to protect and bills to pay, and a business that barely stayed afloat on good days. But Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. The right thing is usually the hard thing. Really? Noah's face lit up with hope. We're keeping it? Yeah, buddy, we're keeping it. But that means we need to be smart about this. No more working on it in the open garage bay where anyone can see. We move it somewhere more secure, and we figure out what makes it so special that people are willing to threaten us over it. How do we do that? I have no idea, but we'll figure it out together. And that evening, Ethan called in a favor from Marcus and two other guys he knew from the neighborhood. Together, they moved Phoenix into the bay furthest from the street and set up curtains to block the view from outside. It wasn't perfect security, but it was better than having the car on display for anyone watching. You sure about this? Marcus asked while they were securing the curtains. Because it's not too late to take the money and walk away. I'm not sure about anything, but I'm tired of people telling me what to do with something that's mine. Stubborn doesn't mean smart. Never said it did. Marcus shook his head but didn't argue further. They finished the work in silence, and by the time everyone left, Phoenix was hidden from casual view. It felt like a small victory in a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Late that night, after Noah was asleep, Ethan sat at his laptop researching everything he could find about Martin Voss. Most of the information was thin. A few mentions in automotive journals from the early 80s, describing him as a promising independent engineer. One article from 1985 mentioned he was working on revolutionary suspension technology, but didn't provide details. Then buried in a forum post from 2003, he found something interesting. A retired engineer claiming he'd worked with Voss in 1986 described him as paranoid and obsessive, convinced that corporate interests were trying to steal his designs. The engineer said Voss had disappeared suddenly, taking his prototype with him, and rumors suggested he'd been paid off to destroy it by competitors who felt threatened. But if Voss had been paid to destroy the prototype, why had Eleanor ended up with it? And why keep it hidden for 40 years? Ethan printed out everything he could find and added it to the manila envelope. The technical drawings still didn't make complete sense to him. His knowledge was practical, learned from fixing broken cars, not engineering school. But he could see that Voss had been designing something genuinely innovative. His phone buzzed at 11:30. Another unknown number. He considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Mr. Cole?" The voice was female, younger than Patricia Winters. The voice was with an accent he couldn't place. "Please don't hang up. I'm calling because you're in danger and you need to know the truth about what you have." "Who are you?" My name is Sophia. I am a researcher specializing in automotive history. I've been tracking the Voss prototype for 3 years, and I need you to understand that the people contacting you are not who they claim to be." "What does that mean?" David Chen isn't a collector. He's a broker who works for technology companies looking to acquire intellectual property through questionable means. Patricia Winters doesn't represent any legitimate estate. The Voss family never had children. And whoever threatened you this afternoon is likely connected to a corporate entity that has spent millions trying to suppress Voss's technology. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm not offering to buy the car. I'm offering to help you understand what you have, so you can make an informed decision." Sophia's voice was earnest, urgent. Sophia's voice set. Martin Voss designed a suspension system that could have revolutionized vehicle dynamics, but it threatened multiple manufacturers who'd invested heavily in existing technology. They couldn't let it succeed. So what happened to him? That's the question I've been trying to answer for 3 years. Official records say he moved to Europe, but I found evidence he was offered $2 million to destroy his prototype and disappear. I think he took the money but kept the car, hiding it with his mother. Eleanor. Yes, she kept it safe for decades, probably not even understanding what she had. But now that it's surfaced, everyone who thought it was gone forever is scrambling to acquire or destroy it. Ethan rubbed his eyes, exhaustion and stress making it hard to think clearly. "What do you want from me?" "Permission to document the car, to photograph and measure the suspension system, study the engineering, publish the findings. This is a piece of automotive history that deserves to be known, not buried again because corporations find it inconvenient. And what do I get out of that?" "Receipt." "The truth and protection. Once the technology is publicly documented, there's no point in anyone trying to suppress it anymore. You become much safer." It made sense in a way that was almost too convenient, but Ethan was running out of options, and Sophia was offering something the others weren't, information instead of money. "I need time to think about it." "But nuts. Mr. Cole, I don't think you have much time. The people interested in this car aren't patient. Please consider letting me help before something happens that can't be undone." She ended the call, leaving Ethan sitting alone in his kitchen with too many pieces of a puzzle he didn't understand. The next morning started with chaos. Ethan woke to pounding on the shop door at 6:30. He stumbled downstairs, still half asleep, to find 2 police officers standing outside. "Ethan Cole?" "Yeah, what's going on?" "We received a report of stolen property on these premises. We need to search your garage." Ethan's brain snapped fully awake. "Stolen property? What are you talking about?" "A 1980s vehicle matching the description of a car reported stolen in Pennsylvania in 1987. We have a warrant." They showed him the paperwork. It looked official enough to be terrifying. Ethan's hands started shaking as he unlocked the garage, his mind racing through scenarios that all ended badly. The officers went straight to the bay where Phoenix was hidden behind curtains. One of them pulled out a clipboard with a vehicle identification number and started searching for the VIN plate. "Sir, where did you acquire this vehicle?" "Salvage yard. I have the title. It's legal." The warrant suggests otherwise. Ethan felt panic rising in his chest. "Someone's lying. I bought it legally. Tommy Brennan at Brennan's Salvage sold it to me. He got it from an estate sale. Everything was done properly. The officers exchanged looks that suggested they'd heard variations of this story before. One of them started photographing Phoenix from multiple angles, while the other continued searching for identification markers. "Dad!" Noah's voice came from the doorway to the apartment. "What's happening?" "Go back upstairs, buddy." "But now, Noah." The kid disappeared, but Ethan could hear his footsteps on the stairs, not going to his room, but probably sitting where he could listen. Another moment of childhood innocence destroyed by adult complications. The officers spent 20 minutes examining Phoenix, taking photos, making notes, occasionally speaking into their radios in codes Ethan didn't understand. Finally, they stepped back. "Mr. Cole, we're going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "Am I being arrested?" "Not at this time, but there are serious questions about this vehicle's provenance. We need your cooperation to sort this out." Ethan called Mrs. Henderson to watch Noah, then followed the police to the station in his own truck, feeling like his life was collapsing in real time. The interview room was exactly like the ones on TV. Gray walls, metal table, chairs that were deliberately uncomfortable. The detective who questioned him was in his 50s, with the worn-down expression of someone who'd heard every lie and excuse possible. "Walk me through how you acquired the vehicle." Ethan explained everything. The salvage yard, the title, Tommy Brennan, the estate sale. The detective listened without expression, occasionally making notes. "And you weren't aware the vehicle might be stolen?" "I had a legal title. How would I know?" "What?" "Mr. Cole, that title has been flagged as potentially fraudulent. The original vehicle was reported stolen from a private residence in Harrisburg in 1987. The owner at the time was Martin Voss, who filed a police report claiming it had been taken without permission." "That doesn't make sense. The registration papers show he transferred it to Eleanor Voss in 1989, which would be 2 years after the theft report. Convenient timing." Ethan felt the walls closing in. Someone had manufactured this situation, created evidence that made him look like he was knowingly dealing in stolen property. But who and why? "I want a lawyer." The detective nodded like he'd expected that. "That's your right. But Mr. Cole, I'm going to be straight with you. You're in a difficult position. Best case scenario, you lose the car and walk away. Worst case, you're looking at charges related to trafficking in stolen goods." "I bought it legally." "Oh, so you say, but the evidence suggests otherwise." The detective slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is the original theft report from 1987. Martin Voss claimed his prototype racing vehicle was stolen from his garage. Described it down to the modifications. Matches what you have perfectly." "Burst! Bomb to shit." Ethan stared at the report, feeling something dark settle in his stomach. This wasn't random. Someone had deliberately created a paper trail to make Phoenix untouchable, ensuring that whoever possessed it would be too afraid of legal consequences to keep it. "I need to make a phone call. You can call a lawyer from the waiting area. We're done here for now. But don't leave town. We'll need to speak with you again." They released him without charges, but the message was clear. Phoenix was now evidence in a theft investigation, and Ethan's ownership was questionable at best. He sat in his truck in the station parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do now. His phone rang. Sophia. "Mr. Cole, I heard what happened. The theft report is fabricated. I can prove it." "How?" "Because I found the actual police records from 1987. No theft was ever reported. Someone created that document recently using old forms and forged signatures. I can provide evidence, but you need to let me document the car before they confiscate it." Ethan felt like he was drowning, grabbing at anything that might keep him afloat. "When?" "Tonight, after dark. I'll need 2 hours with the vehicle, maybe less." "And you can prove the theft report is fake?" "I can prove enough to raise serious questions about who's behind this. That might be all you need." Fine. It was a massive risk. But Ethan was out of good options, and Sophia was offering something that resembled hope. "Okay, come to the shop at 9. Back entrance." He drove home in silence, his mind spinning through everything that had happened in less than 72 hours. He'd bought a car for $100 and somehow ended up in the middle of corporate conspiracy, threats, fraud, and manipulation. When he got home, Noah was waiting in the garage, sitting on the floor near Phoenix with tears streaming down his face. "They're going to take it, aren't they?" Ethan sat down beside his son and pulled him close. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe. But I'm going to fight as hard as I can to keep that from happening." "Why is this happening?" "Because sometimes when things are special, people get scared. And scared people do stupid things to protect themselves." They sat together on the cold garage floor, holding on to each other, and a car that had somehow become the center of a storm neither of them understood. That night, at 9 sharp, Sophia arrived. Sophia Martinez arrived in a beat-up Honda Civic that looked like it had seen better decades, not just better days. She was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 28, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She carried 2 equipment cases and had the nervous energy of someone who'd consumed too much coffee and not enough sleep. "Mr. Cole?" She extended her hand. "Thank you for trusting me." "I'm not sure I do yet," Ethan said honestly, but he shook her hand anyway and led her into the garage through the back entrance. He'd sent Noah to spend the night at Marcus's house, not wanting his son anywhere near whatever this turned out to be. Sophia set down her cases and approached Phoenix like someone approaching a religious artifact. Her hands hovered over the hood for a moment before making contact, and Ethan watched her expression shift from anticipation to something close to awe. "It's real," she whispered. "After 3 years of research, I'd started thinking maybe it was all just legend." "Yeah, well, it's real, and it's causing me a hell of a lot of problems." "I know." "I'm sorry about that." Sophia pulled out a professional camera and started photographing Phoenix from multiple angles, her movements quick and efficient. "The people who want this car buried have significant resources. They were always going to make this difficult." "Who are they exactly?" "Consortium of automotive manufacturers who formed in the mid-'80s specifically to suppress independent innovations that threatened their market dominance. They're not official. No corporate letterhead. No public records. But they've been connected to at least 7 major engineering breakthroughs that mysteriously never reached production." Ethan leaned against his workbench, watching her work. "And you think Martin Voss was one of their targets?" "I know he was. I found internal memos from 1986 discussing him as a competitive threat requiring neutralization. That's corporate speak for destroy him before he destroys us." Sophia crouched beside the suspension, running her fingers along the custom mounting points. "His design would have made vehicles safer, more efficient, and significantly cheaper to manufacture, which sounds great until you realize it would have cost the major manufacturers billions in retooling and made their existing technology obsolete overnight. So they paid him to disappear. $2 million in 1987, equivalent to about $5 million today. The deal was he'd take the money, destroy the prototype, and never work in the automotive industry again." Sophia pulled out a measuring tape and started taking precise dimensions. "But he didn't destroy it. He hid it with his mother and vanished. The manufacturers thought they'd won, but they never confirmed the prototype was actually gone, until I dragged it out of a salvage yard and everyone panicked." "Exactly." Sophia moved to the other side of the car, photographing the chassis reinforcements. "The theft report you saw today was fabricated within the last 72 hours. I can prove it because the report number doesn't match the sequence used by Harrisburg PD in 1987, and the signature belongs to an officer who didn't start working there until 1992. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've spent 3 years tracking down every piece of paper related to Martin Voss. I know which forms were used when, who signed what, and what the actual police records show." She looked up at him, her expression serious. "Mr. Cole, you stumbled into something that powerful people spent decades trying to bury. They will do whatever it takes to make this go away, and including framing me for possession of stolen property." "Including that, and worse, if necessary." Sophia returned to her equipment case and pulled out what looked like a laptop connected to some kind of scanning device. "Which is why we need to document everything tonight. Once this information is public, the car becomes less valuable to suppress. They can't unring that bell. Ethan watched her work for a while, fighting the exhaustion that wanted to pull him under. His life had been simple 3 days ago. Difficult, but simple. Wake up, work, take care of Noah, collapse into bed. Now he was harboring some kind of automotive researcher in his garage at night, documenting a car that corporations apparently wanted buried. While police investigated him for theft, he didn't commit. "What happens after you publish this?" he asked. "Honestly, I don't know. Ideally, the engineering community recognizes the historical significance. Museums want to display it, and you become the guy who preserved an important piece of automotive history." Sophia adjusted her scanner and started capturing three-dimensional data of the suspension components. Less ideally, the manufacturers try to discredit the findings, and you remain in legal limbo. That's not very reassuring. "I'm a researcher, not a motivational speaker. I deal in facts." She paused, meeting his eyes. "But here's a fact. Keeping this hidden doesn't protect you. It just gives them time to manufacture more evidence against you. Going public is your best defense. And what do you get out of this? The biggest discovery of my career, a chance to prove that independent innovation was systematically suppressed. And maybe, if I'm lucky, enough academic credibility to actually get tenure instead of being the crazy conspiracy theorist in the department." Ethan appreciated the honesty, at least she wasn't pretending this was purely altruistic. "How long do you need?" 2 hours to document the suspension system and key modifications. Then I'll need access to those technical drawings you mentioned. After that, I'm gone and you never saw me. Except you're publishing everything, which means everyone will know you were here. True, but by then it won't matter. The information will be out there, and you'll have proof that what you own is historically significant, not stolen. It wasn't a perfect plan, but perfect wasn't an option anymore. Ethan made coffee while Sophia worked, then sat on an overturned bucket watching her measure and photograph and scan. She moved with the focused intensity of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment, occasionally muttering technical observations to herself that Ethan only partially understood. Around 10:30, she took a break to review her data, scrolling through images on her laptop with a satisfied expression. "This is incredible," she said, more to herself than to him. "The geometry is even more sophisticated than the drawing suggested." Voss wasn't just improving existing technology. He was fundamentally rethinking how suspension systems work. "In English?" Sophia looked up, startled, like she'd forgotten he was there. "Sorry. Basically, he figured out how to make cars handle better while using fewer parts and less expensive materials. It's elegant engineering. Beautiful, really. Beautiful enough that corporations wanted it dead? Beautiful enough that it threatened a $100 billion industry. Yeah." She closed her laptop and stretched, her back making an audible crack. "Can I see the technical drawings now?" Ethan retrieved the manila envelope and spread the contents across his workbench. Sophia's eyes went wide. "These are originals?" Came with the car. Mr. Cole, do you understand what you have here? These are Martin Voss's actual design documents. Hand-drawn, annotated, with his calculations and notes. This is like finding Da Vinci's notebook. Da Vinci didn't get people threatened by corporate hit squads. Fair point. Sophia started photographing each page carefully, making sure to capture every detail. But still, this is extraordinary. She worked in silence for another hour, documenting every piece of paper, every note, every calculation. Ethan's eyes started to blur with exhaustion, but he stayed alert, listening for any sound that might indicate they weren't as alone as they thought. Around midnight, Sophia finally packed up her equipment. "I have what I need. Give me 48 hours to compile everything and submit it for publication. I'm sending it to 3 different journals simultaneously. Harder to suppress if it's in multiple places." "And then what?" Then it's out of my hands and into the academic community, which means it becomes public record, historical documentation. She handed him a business card. "If anyone contacts you claiming to be from my university, call me first to verify. The people who want this buried might try to impersonate officials." Is there anyone I can actually trust in this situation? Sophia considered the question seriously. "Me? Because my career depends on this being legitimate. your lawyer once you get one, and maybe your local community because they don't have a financial stake in the outcome. She paused at the door. Mr. Cole, I know this is scary, but you did the right thing by not selling immediately. That car represents something important, proof that innovation matters more than corporate profit. Don't let them take that away. She left through the back entrance, her Civic disappearing into the night. Ethan locked up behind her and stood alone in his garage, staring at Phoenix. I really hope she knows what she's talking about, he said to the empty room. The car, as usual, didn't answer. Ethan picked up Noah from Marcus's house the next morning, and during pointed questions about why the kid had needed to stay over on a school night, he gave vague answers about security concerns and was grateful when Marcus didn't push for details. Dad, did the lady help last night? Noah asked on the drive back to the shop. How did you know there was a lady? I saw her pull up before Marcus made me go to bed. She had equipment and stuff. Ethan should have known nothing got past his son. She's a researcher. She's trying to prove that the theft report about Phoenix is fake. Is it fake? Yeah, I think it is. Someone made it up to scare us. Noah was quiet for a moment, processing. Are you scared? Ethan wanted to lie, to be the strong father who never showed fear. But he was exhausted and stressed and completely out of his depth, and Noah deserved honesty. Yeah, buddy, I'm pretty scared, but we're going to get through this. Together? Together. They spent the morning trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Ethan had 2 jobs scheduled, an oil change and a brake inspection. Simple work that required minimal thinking, which was good because his mind kept drifting to worst-case scenarios. Around 11, a car pulled up that made Ethan's stomach clench. Not a gray sedan this time, but a sleek black SUV with tinted windows that screamed money and power. The driver's door opened, and Isabella Laurent stepped out. She was dressed in business casual today, expensive but not ostentatious, her dark hair down instead of pulled back. She approached the shop entrance with the confident stride of someone used to walking into rooms and commanding attention. Mr. Cole? Her voice was smooth, controlled. I'm Isabella Laurent. I live across the street. I know who you are. I'm sure you do. May I come in? Every instinct told Ethan to say no, to send her away before she could add more complications to an already impossible situation. But curiosity won out. Shop's open. Can't stop you. Yisha Messi. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping across the space with the assessing look of someone cataloging every detail. When her eyes landed on the curtained bay hiding Phoenix, one eyebrow raised slightly. Interesting security measures. I have my reasons. Oh. I'm sure you do. That's actually why I'm here. Isabella turned to face him directly. I've been watching the unusual activity around your shop the past few days. Cars parked on the street for hours. Visitors at odd times. Police showing up yesterday morning. It's concerning. Concerning for who? For the neighborhood, for property values, for everyone who lives on this street. Her tone was matter of fact, not hostile, but the implication was clear. I'm not here to judge your business, Mr. Cole. I'm here because I want to understand what's happening so I can assess whether it affects my interests. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. My problems don't affect you. Ichi at. Everything that happens on this street affects me. That's how property ownership works. Isabella crossed her arms. I heard you acquired a vehicle that's attracting attention from collectors and possibly organized fraud. Is that accurate? Who told you that? I have friends in legal circles. Word gets around when police start investigating stolen property claims. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to offer help. That caught Ethan off guard. Help how? I have resources you don't. Lawyers on retainer, security services, connections to people who can investigate fraudulent documents and trace their origins. Isabella pulled out her phone and tapped something on the screen. I also have this, a friend in forensic document analysis who owes me a favor. She can prove whether that theft report is legitimate within 24 hours. Why would you do that? Because chaos on my street is bad for business. And because despite what you might think of me, I don't like watching people get railroaded by corporate interests. She held out her phone, showing what looked like a contact page. This is her information. Call her, send her the documents. She'll tell you what's real and what's fabricated. Ethan stared at the phone, trying to reconcile this offer with everything he'd assumed about Isabella Laurent. She was supposed to be the ice queen who cared only about property values and maintaining separation from the working-class neighbors. This didn't fit that narrative. What's the catch? No catch. Consider it enlightened self-interest. If you're dealing with organized fraud, I want it exposed and shut down before it becomes a bigger problem for the neighborhood. Isabella lowered her phone. And frankly, Mr. Cole, you look like you could use help from someone who knows how to fight people with money. I don't need charity from rich neighbors. It's not charity, it's strategy. Her voice carried an edge now. You're fighting alone against people with significant resources. That's not brave, it's stupid. Accept help when it's offered or keep struggling until they bury you. Your choice. The blunt assessment stung because it was accurate. Ethan was drowning, and pride was a poor life preserver. Why do you care? He asked finally. Isabella was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting to the curtained bay. Because 3 years ago, a tech startup tried to steal proprietary code from my company using fabricated breach of contract claims. They had lawyers, money, and connections. They assumed I'd settle to avoid the legal costs of fighting. Her expression hardened. I spent $2 million and 18 months proving they were frauds. Bankrupted them. I don't like bullies, Mr. Cole, and what's happening to you smells like bullying. But Ethan studied her, trying to read the truth beneath the polished exterior. She held his gaze without flinching, and he saw something there he recognized. The particular fury of someone who'd been pushed too far and decided to push back. I already have someone working on proving the documents are fake. Good. Having 2 independent sources is better. My contact works faster than academic researchers. Isabella pulled out a business card and set it on the workbench. Call her today. Tell her I sent you. She'll prioritize the analysis. She turned to leave, then paused. And Mr. Cole, whatever that car is, whatever it represents, don't let them intimidate you into giving it up. People who resort to fraud and threats have already lost the moral argument. Now you just need to win the legal one. She left before Ethan could respond, the SUV pulling away as smoothly as it had arrived. He stood holding her business card, his assumptions about Isabella Laurent thoroughly scrambled. Noah emerged from where he'd been hiding in the office, his eyes wide. Was that the mean lady? Yeah. She didn't seem mean. No, she didn't. Ethan looked at the business card, then at Isabella's contact information on his phone where he'd quickly saved it. She seemed like someone who knows what it's like to fight. Are you going to call her person? Yeah, buddy, I think I am. The forensic document analyst's name was Dr. Rachel Kim, and she answered on the second ring with the brisk efficiency of someone who billed by the hour. Dr. Kim speaking. My name is Ethan Cole. Isabella Laurent said I should contact you about analyzing some documents. Ah, yes. Isabella texted me 20 minutes ago. Said you're dealing with potential fraud related to a police report. What do you have? Ethan explained the situation, the theft report, the timing, Sophia's suspicions. Doctor. Kim listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds that suggested she was taking notes. Scan the document and email it to me. I'll have a preliminary analysis by end of day, full report by tomorrow morning. My rate is $500 for rush jobs. Ethan's stomach dropped. I can't afford. Isabella's covering it. She set up a retainer account specifically for neighborhood legal issues. You're covered for up to $5,000 in analysis fees. Doctor. Kim's tone softened slightly. She does this more often than you'd think. Drives her CFO crazy. Why? You'd have to ask her. Now send me that document so I can actually help you. Ethan hung up and immediately scanned the theft report the detective had shown him, emailing it to Doctor. Kim with hands that shook slightly from a combination of exhaustion and something that might have been hope. The rest of the day crawled by. Ethan tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting to worst-case scenarios. Noah did homework in the office, occasionally coming out to ask questions that had nothing to do with math and everything to do with checking that his father was still holding together. At 4:30, Dr. Kim called back. Mr. Cole, I have your preliminary findings. The document is definitely fabricated, created within the past week using aged paper and forged signatures. The font matches modern laser printers. not the typewriters used in 1987. The badge number belongs to an officer who didn't join the force until 5 years after the alleged incident, and the report format doesn't match what Harrisburg PD actually used in that time period. Relief hit Ethan so hard he had to sit down. You're sure? Absolutely certain. This is amateur work. Whoever created it assumed no one would check the details carefully. Her voice carried professional satisfaction. I'm compiling a full report with annotated evidence. You can present this to the police in any court. It definitively proves fraud. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Isabella. She's the one paying for it. Dr. Kim paused. And Mr. Cole? Be careful. People who fabricate police reports aren't operating within normal legal boundaries. Watch your back. Ethan hung up and immediately called the detective who'd questioned him. Detective Morris? This is Ethan Cole. I have evidence that the theft report you showed me is fraudulent. Morris sounded tired. What kind of evidence? Forensic document analysis from Dr. Rachel Kim. She's a certified expert witness. The report was created within the past week using modern equipment and forged signatures. I can send you her findings. There was a long pause. Send it to my email. I'll review it and get back to you. Does this mean I'm cleared? It means I need to investigate further. Don't leave town, Mr. Cole. The detective hung up, and Ethan sat in his quiet shop trying to process the fact that for the first time in days, something had gone right. The theft report was provably fake. He had documentation from a credible expert. The police would have to acknowledge that someone was deliberately framing him. He called Sophia next. Mr. Cole, I was just about to call you. I submitted the documentation to 3 journals this morning. 2 have already responded confirming receipt and starting peer review. Which will... Good, because I just got proof that the theft report is fabricated. A forensic analyst destroyed it completely. That's fantastic. Can you send me a copy? It supports everything I'm publishing. And Ethan forwarded Dr. Kim's report, then leaned back in his chair and let exhaustion wash over him. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they were moving in the right direction. That evening, after Noah was asleep, Ethan stood in the garage looking at Phoenix. The car sat in shadows, still rusted and battered, but somehow more significant now that he knew its full story. Martin Voss had built something revolutionary and been paid to destroy it, but he'd refused. He'd hidden it instead, protecting his work even after accepting the money to make it disappear. Ethan understood that impulse now. Some things mattered more than money. Some fights were worth having even when the smart move was walking away. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Last chance to walk away before things get ugly. Ethan stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Let them threaten. He had documentation, expert analysis, and evidence of fraud. They'd already shown their hand by fabricating the police report, and now their tactics were exposed. Another text arrived, this time from Isabella Laurent. I heard Kim's analysis came through clean. Well done. If you need anything else, let me know. And stop being so suspicious of help. Despite everything, Ethan found himself smiling. Isabella Laurent was not who he'd thought she was. He texted back, "Thank you for the help, I mean it." Her response came quickly, "You're welcome. Now get some sleep. You look terrible." He laughed out loud at that, the sound startling in the quiet garage. When was the last time he'd laughed? He couldn't remember. The next 2 days passed in a strange mixture of tension and progress. Detective Morris called to confirm they were dropping the investigation based on Dr. Kim's analysis and had opened a new investigation into who'd fabricated the false report. Sophia's research was accepted by one journal and under review at the others. And the threatening calls stopped completely, which somehow made Ethan more nervous than when they were constant. On Thursday morning, Marcus showed up with coffee and news. "So I heard through the grapevine that the Ice Queen offered you help. Her name is Isabella. And yeah, she did. And? And she paid for forensic analysis that proved the theft report was fake. Basically saved my ass." Marcus whistled low. "Didn't see that coming." "Neither did I." "So what now? You keeping Phoenix or what?" Ethan had been thinking about that question constantly. With the theft charges dropped and Sophia's research going public, he was no longer under immediate threat. He could probably sell the car now without legal complications. Use the money for all the practical things that money was supposed to fix. But every time he seriously considered it, he thought about Noah's face when they named it Phoenix. About Sarah saying the right thing was usually the hard thing. About Martin Voss spending decades protecting his work instead of letting it be destroyed. "I'm keeping it," he said finally. "We're going to restore it properly, however long it takes." "You're insane." "Probably, but I'm okay with that." Marcus shook his head but was grinning. "All right then, what do you need?" "Help, time, and someone who knows more about custom fabrication than I do, because some of these parts are going to need to be handmade." "I know a guy. He does custom work for the classic car crowd. Expensive, but if you're serious about this, he's who you want. Set up a meeting. Let's see what we're really dealing with." That afternoon, Sophia called with news that sent everything in a new direction. "Mr. Cole, you need to see this. I'm sending you a link." Ethan opened the email on his phone and found a link to a major automotive news website. The headline read, "Los Voss prototype discovered after 4 decades. Revolutionary engineering preserved by small-town mechanic." The article detailed everything. Martin Voss's disappearance, the corporate suppression, the prototype's rediscovery. It included Sophia's analysis and photographs of Phoenix's engineering. And prominently featured was Ethan's role in preserving it, presented not as a small-town mechanic who'd gotten lucky, but as someone who'd protected an important piece of automotive history against significant pressure. "It's everywhere," Sophia said, her voice electric with excitement. 6 major outlets picked it up within an hour. "The engineering community is losing their minds." "You're famous, Mr. Cole." I don't want to be famous. I just want to fix my car." "Too late for that, but famous might actually help you. Public attention makes it harder for anyone to mess with you without consequences." She was probably right, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that exposure came with its own set of problems. That evening, his phone started ringing constantly. Journalists wanting interviews, collectors making offers, museums asking about potential displays. And through it all, Noah sat at the kitchen table doing homework, occasionally looking up with an expression that suggested he was trying to figure out if this was good chaos or bad chaos. Around 8, someone knocked on the garage door. Ethan opened it to find Isabella Laurent standing there again, this time holding a bottle of wine and looking amused. "Congratulations, you broke the internet." "That wasn't the plan. Plans rarely survive contact with reality. May I come in?" Ethan stepped aside and Isabella entered, her gaze immediately finding Noah at the table. "You must be Noah. I'm Isabella. I live across the street." "Bull." "I know. You're the mean lady who's actually nice." Noah's directness made Ethan wince, but Isabella laughed. "That's probably fair. I'm working on the nice part." She set the wine on the counter. "For your father. Celebration for not getting arrested for car theft." "I wasn't going to get arrested." "You were absolutely going to get arrested if we hadn't proved fraud. Accept the victory." Assisi. Ethan found 2 glasses while Noah watched with undisguised interest. Isabella pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table like she'd been doing it for years. "So what's your plan now?" she asked. "The world knows about Phoenix. Every collector and museum on the planet wants it. You could auction it for millions." "We're keeping it and restoring it," Noah announced before Ethan could answer. "Right, Dad?" "Right. We're keeping it. Bushy." Isabella studied them both, her expression unreadable. "You know that's the hard choice." "Usually is," Ethan said. "Good. I respect that." She accepted a glass of wine. "And if you need help with the restoration, contacts, resources, whatever, let me know. I owe my company's existence to engineers who took hard roads instead of easy money. This feels like continuing that tradition." They talked for an hour about nothing particularly important. Neighborhood gossip, Noah's school projects, Isabella's frustrations with city zoning boards. It felt normal in a way Ethan's life hadn't felt in years, like having friends instead of just surviving. After Isabella left and Noah was in bed, Ethan stood in the garage one more time, looking at Phoenix in the dim light. "We made it through the worst of it," he said quietly. "Now comes the really hard part, actually fixing you." Somewhere in his memory, Sarah's voice whispered that hard things were worth doing, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan believed it might be true. The media attention died down after 2 weeks, which Ethan was grateful for. Journalists moved on to other stories, collectors stopped calling every hour, and life settled into something that resembled normal again. Except now normal included Isabella Laurent showing up at the shop twice a week with coffee and unsolicited advice about everything from business management to Noah's reading habits. "You need to expand, but," she said one morning, standing in the middle of the garage with her arms crossed. "The space is too small for what you're trying to do. What I'm trying to do is fix cars and pay bills. Space is fine." "Space is not fine. You've got Phoenix taking up an entire bay, which means you're losing income every day you work on it instead of paying jobs. And your storage situation is a disaster." She gestured at the cluttered workbench. "You need organization, efficiency." Ethan took a long drink of coffee to avoid responding immediately. Isabella meant well, but she approached problems like someone who'd never had to choose between fixing the water heater and buying groceries. Money solved things in her world. In his world, money was the thing you never had enough of. "I can't afford to expand. I know someone who owns the empty building next door. I could negotiate a lease. Isabella, I appreciate what you're trying to do. Really, but I can't take on more debt right now." She looked like she wanted to argue, then seemed to catch herself. "Fine, but at least let me help you get organized. You're wasting time looking for tools that should be in consistent places." "You want to organize my shop?" "I want to help. There's a difference." Before Ethan could respond, Noah burst through the door with the explosive energy that marked the end of a school day. He stopped short when he saw Isabella, then grinned. "Did you bring cookies again?" "In the car. Go get them before I change my mind about sharing." Isabella waited until Noah had sprinted outside, then turned back to Ethan. "He's a good kid." "He is." "Sarah would be proud of what you're doing." The statement caught Ethan completely off guard. He'd never mentioned Sarah's name to Isabella, which meant she'd been asking around about him, learning his history, caring enough to know the context of his life. "You've been talking to the neighbors. Mrs. Henderson is very informative when you bring her tomatoes from the farmer's market." Isabella's expression softened. "I know what it's like to rebuild after loss. Different circumstances, but the fundamentals are the same. You're doing better than you think you are." Noah returned with a box of expensive cookies that probably cost more than Ethan typically spent on food in a week. The kids settled at the workbench with homework while the adults moved to Phoenix, where the real work was finally beginning. Marcus's contact had come through the previous week, a fabricator named Dennis Chen, who specialized in custom automotive work. He'd spent 3 hours examining Phoenix, taking measurements, and occasionally making sounds that suggested he was both impressed and concerned. "This is going to be expensive," Dennis had said bluntly. "We're talking custom fabrication for parts that don't exist anymore, hand-building components from scratch. I can do it, but you're looking at $60,000, maybe $70,000 for a full restoration." The number had hit Ethan like a truck. He'd known it would be expensive, but hearing it out loud made the scope of what he'd committed to brutally clear. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then we do it in phases. Prioritize the structural and mechanical work first. Make it safe and functional. Cosmetics can wait." Dennis had pulled out a notebook and started sketching a timeline. "I can stretch the work over a year, maybe 18 months if we're strategic about it. You pay as we go. Interests me enough, and I might even discount the labor because this car is legitimately cool." They'd shaken on it, and now Phoenix was officially in restoration mode, which meant Ethan was working 2 jobs, his regular mechanic work during the day and restoration work at night. Sleep became something he did in 4-hour blocks when exhaustion forced it. Coffee became a food group. And Noah started spending more evenings at Marcus's house or being watched by Mrs. Henderson because Ethan needed uninterrupted time with the car. Isabella noticed the strain within days. "You look like hell," she said that morning with her typical bluntness. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I'm fine. You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground. She set down her coffee cup with enough force to make a point. Let me help. I can contribute to the restoration costs. No? Ethan? No. This is my project. Mine and Noah's. I'm not taking money from you or anyone else. That's pride talking, not practicality. Maybe, but it's my pride and my decision. Ethan softened his tone, not wanting to be ungrateful. You've already helped more than you needed to. The document analysis, the legal support, even just showing up here and treating me like I'm not crazy for doing this. That matters. But the restoration has to be something we do ourselves. Isabella studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You're stubborn. So I've been told. Fine, but I'm still bringing coffee and organizing your workspace whether you like it or not. Call it enlightened self-interest. I have to look at this building from my house, and it's depressing watching you struggle. Despite himself, Ethan smiled. Deal. Yevi Chico. 48. The restoration work fell into a rhythm. Dennis would come by twice a week to work on the complex fabrication, rebuilding the suspension components, repairing the frame damage, custom fitting new panels where the rust had won its war against metal. Ethan handled what he could himself, stripping parts, cleaning components, researching original specifications through online forums where Phoenix had become something of a celebrity. Noah helped when school allowed, his small hands perfect for reaching into tight spaces that gave Ethan's adult fingers trouble. They'd work side by side in comfortable silence, only occasionally broken by questions about how something worked or why it mattered. Dad? Noah asked one evening while they were removing the interior door panels. Why is this so important to you? Ethan paused, considering how to answer honestly. Because it feels like finishing something someone else started. Martin Voss built this car and then had to hide it because people were scared of what it represented. Restoring it feels like saying his work mattered, that he wasn't wrong to protect it. Is that why you didn't sell it? Partly. Also because you named it Phoenix, and that felt right somehow. Like we were supposed to be the ones to bring it back. Noah absorbed this with the seriousness he applied to important information. Mom would have liked this project. Yeah, buddy, I think she would have. They worked in silence after that. The garage filled only with the sounds of tools and the distant traffic on Route 9. A month into the restoration, Sophia called with news that shifted everything again. Mr. Cole, something interesting happened. A museum in Detroit contacted me asking about Phoenix. The Hamilton Automotive Museum. They want to do an exhibit on suppressed innovations in American engineering. Your car would be the centerpiece. They want to display it? For 6 months. They're offering $25,000 for the loan, plus full insurance coverage and transportation costs. It's significant exposure, and the money could help fund the restoration. Ethan felt conflicting emotions war in his chest. $25,000 would solve immediate problems. But the idea of Phoenix sitting in a museum while he was still trying to fix it felt wrong. How long do I have to decide? They need an answer within 2 weeks. They're planning the exhibit for next spring, so they need to lock down the centerpiece soon. I'll think about it. He called Isabella that evening, something he'd started doing when he needed to talk through complicated decisions. She answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the distracted tone of someone who'd been working. This better be important. I'm in the middle of an acquisition call. Museum in Detroit wants to display Phoenix. 6 months, $25,000. That's good money. What's the problem? The problem is it means halting restoration for however long the exhibit runs. And I don't know if I want to do that. Isabella was quiet for a moment. He could hear voices in the background, then a door closing as she apparently moved somewhere private. Let me ask you something. What's the end goal here? Finish the restoration and keep Phoenix forever? Sell it eventually? Turn it into a rolling museum piece? I haven't thought that far ahead. Then maybe you should, because every decision you make now shapes what this becomes later. Her voice lost its business edge, becoming something more personal. When I started my company, I turned down 3 acquisition offers in the first 5 years. Everyone said I was stupid, that I should take the money and walk away. But I knew if I did that, The company would become something I didn't recognize. What changed? Nothing. I kept building it my way. And yeah, it was harder and took longer than if I'd accepted funding or partnerships. But it stayed mine. That mattered to me more than efficiency. She paused. Only you can decide what matters more, the money or the control. Neither answer is wrong. Ethan thanked her and hung up, then stood in the garage staring at Phoenix. The car was half disassembled now, parts cataloged and organized thanks to Isabella's intervention. It looked worse than when he'd bought it, torn down to bones and frame and potential. What do you think? He asked the empty garage. Should we let people see you before you're ready? His phone buzzed, a text from Noah, who was spending the night at Jason's house. Jason's dad said museums are cool and you should do it if they pay money. Ethan smiled despite the weight of the decision. His 8-year-old son and a billionaire CEO giving him advice. His life had gotten weird. The next morning, he called Sophia back. Tell the museum yes, but with conditions. They have to document the restoration process as part of the exhibit. Show Phoenix as it is now, in progress, not wait until it's perfect. And they have to credit everyone involved. You, Dennis, even Isabella for her support. This isn't just my story. That's actually a better narrative angle. The restoration is part of the exhibition rather than a finished product. Sophia sounded pleased. I'll negotiate the terms and get back to you. Marcus showed up an hour later, apparently having heard the news through the neighborhood information network. So Phoenix is going to Detroit? For 6 months starting next spring. Yeah, that's big time, man. Your car in a real museum. It's not my car. It's Martin Voss's car. I'm just the guy who found it and is too stubborn to let it die. Same difference. Marcus leaned against the workbench, his expression turning serious. You know people are going to have opinions about this, right? Some folks are already saying you're exploiting the attention for money. Let them say it. I know why I'm doing this. Yeah, well, knowing and caring are different things. Just giving you a heads up that the gossip isn't all positive. Ethan had expected that. Success made people uncomfortable, especially when it happened to someone who was supposed to stay in their designated lane. A struggling mechanic was acceptable. A struggling mechanic who became the center of national attention for preserving automotive history threatened people's understanding of how the world worked. I can't control what people think. Nope, but you can control how you respond to it. Keep your head down, do the work, let the results speak for themselves. It was solid advice, and Ethan tried to follow it over the next several weeks. He focused on the restoration, on Noah, on maintaining the balance between paying work and passion project. Dennis made steady progress on the fabrication. The suspension components were coming together, custom-built to Martin Voss's exact specifications, but using modern materials that would last longer. Isabella continued showing up, her visits becoming something Ethan looked forward to rather than tolerated. She had opinions about everything, which should have been annoying but somehow wasn't. She challenged him in ways that made him think harder about his decisions. You're undercharging for your regular work, she announced one afternoon after reviewing his invoices without being asked. These rates are from 2015. You need to raise prices. I raise prices and I lose customers. You lose customers who don't value your expertise. The customers worth keeping will pay fair rates. She pulled out her phone and showed him a spreadsheet she'd apparently created. I did a market analysis. Every other mechanic in a 30-mile radius charges 20 to 40% more than you do for comparable work. You're not being generous. You're being taken advantage of. Or I'm being realistic about what people in this neighborhood can afford. Some people, not all people. You need to segment your pricing. Offer sliding scale for people you know are struggling. Charge full rate for everyone else. It's not exploitation, it's sustainability. Ethan wanted to argue, but the numbers on her spreadsheet were hard to ignore. He was losing money on most jobs when he factored in overhead and materials. At his current rates, he'd never save enough to properly contribute to Phoenix's restoration or build any kind of security for Noah. I'll think about it. Think faster. You're going broke being nice to people who can afford to pay you. She was right, which was frustrating. Ethan started adjusting his rates gradually grandfathering in long-term customers like Mrs. Chen, but charging fair prices for newer clients. The difference was noticeable within weeks. Not enough to be life-changing, but enough to breathe slightly easier. 2 months into the restoration, something unexpected happened. Ethan was working late one night, welding a support bracket for the rear suspension, when he heard breaking glass from the front of the shop. He killed the torch immediately and grabbed the tire iron he kept nearby for reasons that were proving increasingly valid. Someone was trying to force open the front door. Ethan moved quickly but quietly, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the office window, he could see 2 figures working on the lock. Not police this time, not collectors. This looked like straightforward break-in. He called 911 first, keeping his voice low. Then he called Isabella because her house had security cameras that covered the street. Someone's breaking into the shop. I see them, already calling my security service. Her voice was sharp, focused. 2 men, both wearing dark clothes. They came from a van parked 3 blocks down. Stay inside and wait for police. They're going after Phoenix. Let them try. I've got footage of everything, and my security company is 2 minutes out. The front door lock gave way with a metallic crack. The 2 men entered, moving quickly toward the garage bays. Ethan stayed in the shadows, watching. They went straight to the curtain bay where Phoenix sat, which meant they knew exactly what they were looking for. One of them pulled back the curtain and swore loudly. "It's torn apart. The hell are we supposed to do with this?" Boss said, "Get it or destroy it. Pick one." They were discussing which would be easier when sirens split the night. The men ran, abandoning whatever plan they'd had, disappearing out the back entrance seconds before police cars flooded the street. Ethan gave his statement to 3 different officers, showed them the damaged lock, explained about Phoenix and the previous threats. Isabella appeared halfway through, having apparently crossed the street in pajamas and a jacket, carrying her tablet with security footage already queued up. This shows their faces, the van they arrived in, and their license plate. She handed the tablet to the lead officer with the confidence of someone who dealt with police before. "My security service also has enhanced footage from 3 different angles. I'll send everything to your department." The officer looked between Isabella and Ethan like he was trying to understand their dynamic. "You 2 are neighbors? Yeah. And friends?" Isabella said before Ethan could answer. "I keep an eye on the neighborhood. Call it enlightened self-interest." After the police left and the locksmith had secured the front door, Isabella and Ethan stood together in the garage staring at Phoenix. "This is getting dangerous," Isabella said quietly. "I know. You need better security, cameras at minimum, maybe an alarm system. Can't afford it. I can. Isabella, don't be stupid about this. Someone just broke into your shop trying to steal or destroy the car. Next time they might come when Noah's here. Let me install security before that happens." The mention of Noah cut through Ethan's resistance. She was right. Pride was one thing. His son's safety was another. "Okay, but I'm paying you back eventually." "Fine. Add it to the tab." She squeezed his shoulder briefly, a gesture that felt both casual and significant. "I'm going home before I freeze to death. Call me if anything else happens." She left, and Ethan stood alone in the garage, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. The restoration, the threats. The growing realization that what had started as a simple project had become something that threatened to consume everything. His phone buzzed. A text from Noah, who was supposed to be asleep at Mrs. Henderson's. "Are you okay?" Mrs. H said there were police cars. Ethan called instead of texting. "I'm fine, buddy. Someone tried to break in, but the police caught them. Everything's secure now." "Were they trying to steal Phoenix?" "Yeah, but they didn't get it." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Dad, maybe we should sell it if it's making people hurt you." The fear in his son's voice broke something in Ethan's chest. "Nobody's going to hurt me, and we're not selling Phoenix. We're keeping it safe until we can finish what we started. Okay? Promise?" "Promise." He hung up and texted Isabella. "Install the security tomorrow if you can. I need to make sure Noah feels safe here." Her response came immediately. "Team will be there at 8. Go to bed." The security installation took all day. Isabella's team was thorough, installing cameras at every entrance, motion sensors, and an alarm system that could probably protect a bank vault. They also reinforced the locks and added security bars to the windows. "This feels excessive," Ethan said, watching two technicians wire another camera. "Excessive is what happens when someone decides to escalate," Isabella replied. She'd been there all day, overseeing the work like a general directing troops. "We're making sure escalation has consequences." By evening, the shop was locked down tighter than it had ever been. Ethan stood in the garage looking at all the new equipment and tried to reconcile this reality with the simple life he'd thought he was living 2 months ago. "Thank you," he said to Isabella, who was reviewing the security panel settings on her phone. "For all of this, I know I keep saying I don't need help, but I do. And you keep showing up anyway." She looked up, her expression softening. "You're not as alone as you think you are, Ethan. Stop trying to be." That night, after Noah was asleep and the new security system was armed, Ethan sat in the garage one more time. Phoenix looked like a skeleton now. Frame exposed, components scattered across multiple workbenches, every piece cataloged and waiting for reassembly. It was getting worse before it got better, which was apparently the theme of his entire life. But worse was temporary. Better was coming. He had to believe that. The next week brought another shift. Sophia called with news that one of the major automotive manufacturers had reached out, wanting to license Martin Voss's suspension technology for modern production vehicles. They were offering $2 million for the rights, with royalties on every vehicle produced using the design. $2 million, Sophia repeated when Ethan didn't respond immediately. And ongoing royalties that could be worth tens of millions over time. This is everything Voss should have gotten 40 years ago. But the technology came with the car. Doesn't that mean I own it? Legally, yes. You own the physical components and any derivative technology. But, Mr. Cole, I need to be clear. This puts you in a position you're probably not prepared for. This is serious money with serious legal implications. Ethan's mind spun. $2 million. Noah's entire future secured. The shop expansion Isabella kept talking about. Retirement. Security. Everything money could buy. But accepting the offer meant Phoenix would become intellectual property instead of a car, a patent filing instead of a restoration project, something documented and licensed rather than something alive. "I need time to think. Take it. But know that if you say yes, this changes everything. You become a licenser, not a mechanic. That's a fundamentally different life." Ethan called Isabella immediately. $2 million for the suspension technology, plus royalties. She whistled softly. "That's a lot of money. I don't know what to do." "What do you want to do?" "I want to finish restoring Phoenix. I want to teach Noah about engineering and persistence and finishing what you start. I want to honor what Martin Voss built." He paused, trying to articulate the feeling. "Taking the money feels like I'm doing what everyone pressured Voss to do, letting the work become property instead of letting it just exist." "Then don't take it, or take it with conditions. License the technology but retain the right to finish the restoration first. Make them wait until Phoenix is complete before anything goes into production. That way the car exists as both historical artifact and functional technology." It was a middle path Ethan hadn't considered. They'd agree to that, They're desperate enough to offer $2 million. They'll agree to reasonable conditions. Isabella's voice carried the certainty of someone who'd negotiated countless deals. "Want me to help structure it?" "You'd do that?" "Ethan, I've been watching you stress-eat bad coffee and work yourself half to death for weeks. Let me help with something I'm actually good at. Consider it selfish. I'm tired of watching you suffer through things I could fix in an afternoon." He laughed despite the weight of the decision. "Okay, help me structure it, but I want the restoration finished first. Phoenix has to exist as a complete car before any technology gets licensed." "Done. I'll draft preliminary terms and send them to Sophia for review. You focus on the actual work." Over the next month, Isabella negotiated terms while Ethan and Dennis pushed forward on the restoration. The suspension components were complete. The frame was repaired and reinforced. The engine, which Dennis had declared surprisingly sound for its age, was being rebuilt with careful attention to maintaining the original design while using modern materials where it made sense. Noah helped when he could, his understanding of engineering growing with every evening in the garage. The kid asked questions that pushed Ethan to learn more, to understand not just how things worked, but why they worked. It was like watching Sarah's analytical mind reappear in their son, and it made Ethan ache with missing her and pride in equal measure. "Dad?" Noah asked one night while they were cleaning parts. "When Phoenix is done, what happens to it?" "What do you mean? Like, is it just going to sit in museums, or will we get to drive it?" Ethan hadn't actually considered that. The restoration had become so all-consuming that he'd stopped thinking about what came after. "I don't know, buddy. What do you think we should do?" "I think we should drive it. That's what Martin Voss built it for, right? To drive fast and do cool stuff? It seems sad if it just sits still forever." The kid was right. Phoenix was meant to move, to function, to prove that the engineering worked. Keeping it static would be preservation, but not honor. "Yeah, okay, when it's done, we'll drive it. Maybe take it to a track, see what it can actually do." "Really? Really? But that's a long way off. We've got months of work left." "That's okay. Good things take time. Mom used to say that." "Yeah, she did. They worked in comfortable silence after that, the garage filled with the sounds of progress and the weight of memory that no longer felt quite so crushing. By late autumn, the manufacturer's lawyers and Isabella had hammered out an agreement. $2 million up front, with technology licensing deferred until Phoenix's restoration was complete and publicly documented. Royalties on future production would flow into a trust for Noah's education and future. The car itself would remain Ethan's property, free to be displayed or driven as he saw fit. It was everything he needed without compromising what mattered. Isabella had somehow turned a business transaction into something that preserved the spirit of what they were doing. "How did you get them to agree to all this?" Ethan asked after reviewing the final contract. "I told them if they didn't, I'd fund an independent manufacturer to bring Voss's design to market myself. They believed me because I meant it." Isabella smiled. "Never negotiate when you're desperate. Always have a better alternative ready." Ethan signed the contracts on a Thursday morning, with Sophia and Isabella both present as witnesses. The money hit his account that afternoon, $2 million, a number he'd never imagined having. He paid off every bill he owed, set up Noah's trust fund, gave Dennis a bonus that made the fabricator's eyes water, and donated $100,000 to Sophia's research program. The rest went into an account marked for Phoenix's completion and future maintenance. That night, he took Noah out for pizza at the nice place downtown that they'd always walked past because it was too expensive. They ordered whatever they wanted, and Noah's eyes kept drifting to the menu prices with a mixture of disbelief and delight. "We're rich now?" Noah asked, his voice careful. "We're secure now. There's a difference." Ethan tried to find words that would explain money without making it seem like the most important thing. "We don't have to worry about bills anymore. You can go to college without taking loans. We can finish Phoenix properly, but we're not rich like Isabella is rich. We're comfortable. That's better in a lot of ways. Because we still remember what it's like when money is hard." Exactly. Don't ever forget that, okay? Don't ever become the person who thinks money means you're better than other people. "I won't. I promise." They finished their pizza and walked home under streetlights that had been there long before Ethan bought a rusted wreck that changed everything. The neighborhood looked the same houses, same cracked sidewalks, same sense of community built from shared struggle. But Ethan saw it differently now. He saw possibilities instead of limitations, hope instead of just endurance. Isabella was waiting on his doorstep when they got back, holding a folder. Museum contracts came through. They want Phoenix next April. 6 months on display, $25,000. Full insurance and transport. "You still good with that?" "Yeah, we'll be ready by then." She handed him the folder. "Then sign these and we're set. The Hamilton Museum is getting one hell of an exhibit." Ethan signed without reading, trusting Isabella in a way that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. She'd earned that trust through consistent action, showing up when it mattered, fighting for what was right, even when it didn't directly benefit her. "Thank you," he said after handing back the folder, "for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it every time." "You're welcome. And Ethan, you did the hard part. All I did was help with logistics. She smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way her earlier smiles never had. Phoenix is going to be incredible when it's done. Martin Voss would be proud. She left, and Ethan stood on his doorstep with Noah beside him, looking at the garage where something broken was slowly becoming whole again. It had been the hardest 3 months of his life, and there were still months of work ahead. But for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan felt like he was moving towards something instead of just surviving each day. Phoenix was teaching them both how to rise from ashes, and that lesson was worth more than any amount of money. Winter hit hard that year, turning the garage into a freezer that no amount of space heaters could truly warm. Ethan worked through it anyway, his fingers numb inside thin gloves, breath visible in the air while he and Dennis slowly brought Phoenix back to life piece by careful piece. The transformation wasn't smooth. Nothing worth doing ever was. Parts arrived damaged and had to be returned. Custom fabrication took twice as long as Dennis estimated. Paint suppliers sent the wrong color 3 times before getting it right. And through it all, Ethan fought the creeping fear that he'd taken on something too big, that Phoenix would remain forever unfinished, a monument to ambition that exceeded capability. "Stop overthinking," Isabella said one particularly brutal January morning when she found him staring at the half-assembled engine with the expression of someone who'd lost a war. "Progress isn't linear. Some days you move backward. That doesn't mean you're failing. We're supposed to have this ready for the museum in 3 months. Well, me. Then we have 3 months. Plenty of time." She handed him coffee that was still hot despite the freezing temperature. "I've seen you rebuild transmissions in 4 hours. You can finish a car in 12 weeks. Those were normal cars with parts I could order from catalogs. And this is an extraordinary car that requires extraordinary effort. Stop comparing the two." Isabella pulled out her phone and showed him a project timeline she'd apparently created. Dennis finishes the suspension work next week. Engine reassembly takes 2 weeks after that. Bodywork and paint are another 3 weeks. Interior restoration is concurrent. Final assembly and testing leave you 2 weeks of buffer before transport. It's tight, but achievable. "When did you make this?" "Last night. I couldn't sleep, so I built a critical path analysis of the restoration." She said it like this was a normal thing people did at 3 in the morning. Every task is mapped with dependencies and resource allocation. Follow this, and you'll finish with time to spare. Well, Ethan looked at the timeline, then at Isabella, then back at the timeline. She'd somehow turned chaos into order, made the impossible look merely difficult. "You're either the most helpful person I've ever met, or you have serious control issues." "Why not both?" She smiled, and it transformed her face from severe to almost playful. "I like problems I can solve, Ethan. You and Phoenix are problems I can solve. Let me help." So he did. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Isabella would arrive every morning with coffee and her tablet, coordinating between Dennis, the paint shop, the interior specialist she'd found in Philadelphia, and the dozen other moving parts required to finish Phoenix. She ran the restoration like a military campaign, identifying bottlenecks before they became critical and solving logistics problems that would have taken Ethan days to figure out. Noah watched it all with the absorption of someone learning how the world actually worked. He asked Isabella questions about project management and resource allocation, and she answered with the seriousness she'd give an adult. The kid started making his own timeline for a science project, complete with dependencies and critical paths, and his teacher called to ask what had possessed an 8-year-old to submit work that looked like corporate planning documents. "He's learning from Isabella," Ethan explained. "She's teaching him how to think strategically." "Well, it's impressive and slightly terrifying." The teacher paused. "How are you doing, Mr. Cole? I know this year has been intense." "We're managing. Better than managing, actually. We're good." It was true. Despite the pressure and the deadline and the constant work, Ethan felt better than he had in years. Purpose had replaced survival. Community had replaced isolation. And somewhere along the way, the weight of grief had shifted from crushing to carried. Still there, still heavy, but no longer the only thing defining his existence. By March, Phoenix was recognizable again. The body panels were repaired and painted that deep red that had once been hidden under rust and decay. The interior was rebuilt with period-appropriate materials that Dennis had somehow sourced from 3 different continents. The engine sat in its cradle, rebuilt and ready, waiting only for final connections and testing. "We're going to make it," Dennis said one afternoon, stepping back to admire their work. "I didn't think we would. Thought this was one of those projects that sounds good but never actually finishes. But we're going to make it." "Don't jinx it," Ethan muttered, but he was smiling. The first test start happened on a Tuesday morning with half the neighborhood watching from the street. Mrs. Henderson had apparently spread the word that something important was happening, and people had shown up like this was a community event. Marcus brought his whole family. The Rodriguez kids stood on their porch. Even the Peterson teenager who'd backed into the mailbox months ago had wandered over to watch. Isabella stood beside Ethan, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder in a gesture that had become familiar over the past months. Noah sat in the driver's seat, his hand on the key, his face serious with the responsibility of the moment. "You ready, buddy?" Ethan asked. "Ready." Noah's voice was steady. "On 3? On 3. They counted together. 1, 2, 3. Noah turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, and roared to life with a sound that was both mechanical and alive. 40 years of silence broken in an instant. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Mrs. Henderson actually cried. Marcus whooped loud enough to startle his own kids. Ethan felt his throat tighten. They'd done it, against odds that had seemed impossible, against threats and fraud, and every obstacle people with resources had thrown at them. They'd brought Phoenix back from the dead. Noah climbed out of the driver's seat, his eyes shining. "We did it, Dad. We actually did it." "Yeah, buddy, we actually did it." Isabella squeezed his shoulder once, then let go, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "I knew you would. Never doubted it for a second." "You doubted it plenty. I heard you on the phone with Dennis last month asking if this was actually possible." That was strategic contingency planning, not doubt. But she was smiling, and for once the smile reached all the way to her eyes without reservation. "Congratulations, Ethan. You finished something extraordinary." The Hamilton Automotive Museum sent a team 2 weeks later. They arrived with a custom transport truck, insurance documents that ran to 40 pages, and a curator who looked at Phoenix with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "This is remarkable," the curator breathed, walking slowly around the car. "The photographs didn't do it justice. You can see Martin Voss's engineering philosophy in every detail. The efficiency of design, the elegant solutions to complex problems. He was ahead of his time," Sophia said. She'd flown in specifically for the transport, wanting to document Phoenix's journey from restoration to exhibition. "If the industry had embraced his innovations instead of suppressing them, we'd be driving fundamentally different vehicles today. Well, now they'll have the chance to learn from his work." The curator carefully photographed several engineering details. "This exhibit is going to change how people think about automotive innovation. You should be very proud, Mr. Cole." "It wasn't just me. It was a lot of people coming together." Ethan gestured to Dennis, who was hovering nearby, making sure nothing got damaged during loading. Dennis did the fabrication work. Sophia documented everything and fought to make the story public. Isabella kept the whole project organized and funded security when people tried to destroy it. My son named the car and reminded me why finishing it mattered. Yeah, the curator smiled. "A community effort, then. Even better. That's the real story here. Not just one man's engineering genius, but how that genius inspired people decades later to preserve it." Loading Phoenix onto the transport truck felt both triumphant and bittersweet. The car had lived in Ethan's garage for nearly a year, becoming part of the landscape of daily life. Watching it roll up the ramp and disappear into the truck's enclosed trailer felt like sending a kid off to college. Necessary and right, but tinged with loss. Noah stood very close to Ethan, his small hand gripping his father's tightly. "It's coming back, right? After the exhibit?" "Yeah, it's coming back. 6 months in Detroit, then it comes home." "And then we can drive it?" "Then we can drive it." The truck pulled away slowly, carrying Phoenix toward its new temporary home. The small crowd that had gathered to watch, because apparently everything involving Phoenix was now a community event, dispersed gradually. Marcus clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Mrs. Henderson brought over a casserole she'd prepared in advance because she seemed to believe major life events required carbohydrates. Dennis headed back to his shop after extracting a promise that Ethan would call if any questions came up during the exhibit. Isabella lingered after everyone else had left, standing with Ethan and Noah in the empty garage bay where Phoenix had been. "Strange seeing it gone," she said quietly. "Yeah. Good strange or bad strange, I can't quite tell yet." "Both, probably. Important things usually are." She turned to face him directly, her expression unusually uncertain. "Can I take you both to dinner? Actual celebration dinner, not just grabbed food between work. There's something I want to talk to you about." Ethan felt a flutter of nervousness that had nothing to do with car restoration. "Sure, Noah, you good with that? Can we go to the fancy pizza place again? We can go wherever you want, kiddo." Isabella ruffled Noah's hair, a gesture that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. "My treat. You guys earned it." They went to a restaurant Isabella chose, upscale but not intimidatingly so, with white tablecloths and waiters who didn't blink when Noah ordered chicken fingers despite the extensive menu. Over appetizers that Ethan couldn't pronounce, Isabella seemed uncharacteristically nervous, fidgeting with her napkin and not quite meeting his eyes. "So," she started, then stopped. Tried again. "I've been thinking about what comes next. After Phoenix returns from Detroit, what about it? You're going to have options. Museums will want to display it. Collectors will make offers. The manufacturer's royalties are going to provide stable income for years. You could expand the shop, hire people, build something bigger than a one-man operation." "I've thought about that some," Ethan admitted. "Haven't made any decisions yet." "Well, I have a proposal. And before you say no reflexively like you do with everything, just hear me out." Isabella took a breath like she was preparing for a business pitch. "I want to fund a foundation, the Voss Engineering Foundation. Its purpose would be to support underprivileged kids interested in automotive engineering and design. Scholarships, mentorship programs, hands-on learning opportunities. We'd partner with technical schools and community colleges, create pathways for kids who have talent, but not resources." Ethan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "That's a big undertaking. I have big resources, and I'm tired of using them only to make more money." She finally met his eyes. "Phoenix taught me something. It taught me that innovation matters, that protecting good work matters, that communities coming together to support something meaningful actually works. I want to scale that. Make it systematic instead of one-off. What would my role be? Whatever you want it to be. You could be on the board, help design the curriculum, mentor students directly, or you could just be the inspiration, the mechanic who preserved automotive history when people with more money tried to bury it. Either way, I'd want your blessing to name it after Voss and use Phoenix as the symbol." Noah, who had been quietly demolishing his chicken fingers, suddenly spoke up. "I think you should do it, Dad. It's like what Martin Voss would have wanted, his car helping other people learn engineering." "When did you get so wise, Ma?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. "I listen when you and Isabella talk about important stuff." Isabella laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "See, even your 8-year-old gets it. Say yes, Ethan. Let's do something good with all this attention." Ethan thought about Martin Voss, brilliant and paranoid, protecting his work by hiding it away. He thought about what might have happened if Voss had found a community that supported his innovations instead of threatening them. He thought about all the kids like Noah who loved taking things apart and figuring out how they worked, but might never get the chance to turn that curiosity into a career. "Yeah, okay. Let's do it. The Voss Engineering Foundation. I'm in." Isabella's smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd say that. I might have already started drafting the paperwork." "Of course you did. I like to be prepared." She pulled out her tablet, because apparently she brought business plans to celebration dinners. "I've identified 3 technical schools we could partner with initially, secured preliminary funding for the first 2 years, and drafted a mission statement. All it needs is your input and approval." They spent the rest of dinner talking about the foundation, building on Isabella's plans with Ethan's practical knowledge of what young mechanics actually needed to learn. Noah contributed ideas with the unself-conscious confidence of someone who believed adults should listen to kids, and surprisingly, his suggestions were often the best ones. By the time they left the restaurant, the foundation had evolved from concept to concrete plan. They would launch it officially when Phoenix returned from Detroit, using the publicity from the exhibit to draw attention to the cause. Scholarship applications would open that fall, with the first cohort starting the following spring. Walking back to the car, Noah between them holding both their hands, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This was what family looked like, he realized. Not perfect or traditional or matching any particular template, but real, chosen, built from shared purpose and mutual respect and showing up when it mattered. "Isabella?" he said as they reached her car. "Thank you for everything, for pushing me to be better than I thought I could be, for not letting me give up when things got hard, for becoming part of our lives." She blinked rapidly, and he realized she was fighting tears. "You're welcome. And Ethan, thank you for letting me in. I didn't realize how isolated I'd become until you and Noah reminded me what community actually feels like." She hugged him then, brief but genuine, then hugged Noah with equal warmth before getting in her car and driving across the street to her mansion that somehow seemed less imposing than it had a year ago. The months of Phoenix's exhibition passed in a blur of activity. The foundation work consumed most of Isabella's attention, while Ethan focused on expanding the shop and hiring 2 mechanics to handle the regular work, so he could spend more time on specialized projects. Noah thrived in school, his science grades shooting up as he applied Isabella's project management techniques to everything from book reports to organizing his room. They visited Detroit twice to see Phoenix on display. The exhibit was everything the curator had promised: comprehensive, educational, inspiring. Thousands of people came to see the car that represented both engineering genius and the power of preservation. Sophia's academic paper had been published in 3 major journals, sparking renewed interest in automotive history and corporate suppression of innovation. The story had grown beyond Phoenix itself to become a conversation about how innovation happened and who got to decide which ideas deserved to survive. During the second visit, Ethan stood with Noah looking at the car behind its protective barrier, surrounded by interpretive panels that told Martin Voss's story alongside their own. "It looks different here," Noah observed. "More important somehow." "It is more important here. It's not just our project anymore. It's history." "Do you miss it?" "Yeah, but this is right. Phoenix deserves to be seen and studied. We'll get our time with it later." A woman approached them, middle-aged with grease stains on her jacket that marked her as someone who worked with her hands. "Are you Ethan Cole?" "Yeah, that's me. I wanted to thank you. I'm an automotive engineer and I've been fighting my whole career to get innovative designs taken seriously. Seeing what you did with Phoenix, how you protected it against corporate interests, it gave me courage to keep fighting. My latest design just got approved for production. Wouldn't have happened without your example." She shook his hand and walked away before Ethan could fully process what she'd said. But over the course of that visit, 3 more people approached with similar stories. Phoenix had become more than a car. It had become a symbol of what happened when ordinary people decided extraordinary things were worth protecting. The return journey in August was another community event. The transport truck arrived on a Saturday morning, and it seemed like the entire neighborhood turned out to welcome Phoenix home. Marcus had organized it like a parade, with people lining the street, kids waving signs they'd made that said things like, "Welcome home, Phoenix," and "Martin Voss was right." Isabella stood beside Ethan as the truck backed into the garage bay, her hand finding his and squeezing once. "Ready for the next chapter?" "What's the next chapter?" "Driving it. Showing people that innovation isn't just for museums, it's for living." The unloading process was careful and methodical, Dennis supervising every movement to ensure nothing got damaged. When Phoenix finally sat in the garage again, looking exactly as it had when it left, but somehow more itself. After being seen by thousands of people, Noah approached it slowly and placed both hands on the hood. "Welcome home, Phoenix. We missed you." Ethan felt his throat tighten. They'd come so far from that day in the salvage yard when he'd made the questionable decision to buy a rusted wreck for $100. Everything had changed. He'd changed. They'd all changed. "Dad?" Noah looked up at him with those dark eyes that still looked so much like Sarah's. "Can we take it to the track now?" "No." Not quite yet. We need to test everything, make sure 6 months in transport didn't affect anything, verify all the systems are working properly. Ethan knelt beside his son. But, yeah, buddy, we're going to take it to the track. We're going to drive it the way Martin Voss intended it to be driven. Mike, 2 weeks later, after thorough testing and preparation, they loaded Phoenix onto a trailer and drove to a private track 3 hours away. Isabella had arranged it naturally, using connections that Ethan didn't ask about. Dennis came along to monitor the mechanical systems. Sophia showed up with camera equipment to document everything. Marcus and his family made the drive because they'd been part of this story from the beginning and deserved to see how it continued. The track was empty, except for their group, the pavement stretching out in smooth curves that promised speed and possibility. Ethan walked the course first, getting a feel for the layout, while Dennis did final checks on Phoenix's systems. "Everything looks good," Dennis announced. "She's ready to run." "You sure? Because if something breaks..." "Ethan, she's ready. Stop overthinking and drive the damn carts." So he did. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat, feeling the hand-stitched steering wheel under his palms, the custom racing seat supporting him exactly right. The engine thrummed with contained power. 40-year-old design translated through modern materials into something that felt both vintage and immediate. Noah leaned through the window. "You nervous?" "Terrified. What if I crash it?" Then we fix it again." "That's what we do." Noah said it with the confidence of someone who'd learned that broken things could be repaired, that failure wasn't permanent, that starting over was always an option. Ethan pulled out slowly, getting a feel for the car's responses. The steering was precise. The suspension absorbed imperfections in the track like they barely existed. Everything Martin Voss had designed worked exactly as intended, maybe better than intended given the modern materials they'd used. He completed one cautious lap, then another slightly faster. By the third lap, confidence had replaced fear. By the fifth lap, he was pushing Phoenix to show what it could actually do. The car responded like it had been waiting 40 years for someone to finally drive it properly, cornering with impossible grip, accelerating with authority that made Ethan's pulse race. This was what Martin Voss had built. Not just a race car, but a demonstration of what engineering could be when freed from corporate constraints and market compromises. Phoenix wasn't perfect. The steering pulled slightly left under hard braking, and the engine note suggested one cylinder wasn't firing quite evenly. But it was real and functional, and proof that innovation mattered. After 8 laps, Ethan pulled into the paddock area where everyone was waiting. He climbed out, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, to find them all grinning like he'd just won a championship. "How was it?" Isabella asked. "It was perfect, absolutely perfect." "My turn," Noah announced. "You're 8 years old. I can drive around the paddock, just slow. Please." Ethan looked at Isabella, who shrugged with a smile. The kid preserved a piece of automotive history. Let him drive at 10 feet. So Noah got his turn. So Noah, sitting on Ethan's lap with his hands on the wheel, moving Phoenix in careful circles around the paddock area at 5 miles per hour, while everyone watched and cheered. The joy on his son's face was worth every difficult moment of the past year. After everyone else had driven Phoenix, even Mrs. Henderson did a cautious lap, declaring the suspension very smooth for something so old. They gathered for lunch at a picnic area near the track. Sophia had brought sandwiches. Marcus had beer. Isabella had apparently packed an entire gourmet meal that she distributed with the efficiency she brought to everything. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, lounging in the grass with his eyes closed against the sun. "Phoenix is famous, you're funded, the foundation is launching. What's left?" "Teaching kids that engineering matters," Ethan said. "Showing them that innovation isn't about having the most resources or the biggest company. It's about seeing a problem and having the audacity to think you can solve it better than anyone else." "That's a good mission statement," Isabella said. "I'm using that. You're always using something." "That's because you say smart things occasionally." She threw a grape at him, which Noah immediately caught and ate. They sat together in the afternoon sun, this strange family that had been built from circumstance and choice rather than blood. Ethan looked around at these people who'd become central to his life. Isabella, with her fierce competence and unexpected vulnerability, Marcus with his loyalty and honesty, Sophia with her dedication to truth, Dennis with his patient craftsmanship, and Noah holding everything together by simply being himself. Sarah would have loved this, he thought. She would have loved seeing him not just survive, but actually build something meaningful. She would have loved Isabella's directness and Noah's growing confidence. She would have loved knowing that grief hadn't stopped them from living. The thought didn't hurt the way it once had. Grief was still there, but it had transformed from an open wound into something more like an old scar, permanent, and part of him, but no longer defining everything he did. "I want to tell you all something," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the small group. "A year ago, I was barely holding it together, working too much, sleeping too little, just trying to get through each day without falling apart. I bought Phoenix because something told me it mattered, but I didn't understand why. I didn't understand that it was the beginning of everything changing." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "You all saved me. Not Phoenix, not the money, not the recognition. You. By showing up, by refusing to let me stay isolated, by becoming family when I'd forgotten how to let people in. So thank you for everything, for being here." "Hakais." "Ichie." Isabella's eyes were suspiciously bright. Marcus looked away, clearing his throat. Noah climbed into Ethan's lap and hugged him fiercely. Sophia raised her beer in a quiet toast. Dennis nodded with the particular understanding of someone who knew that important things were often hard to articulate. "We're not going anywhere," Isabella said finally. "You're stuck with us now." "Good. I don't want you anywhere else." They stayed at the track until sunset, taking turns driving Phoenix, telling stories, planning the Foundation's future, just being together in the way families were when they actually liked each other. When it was finally time to pack up, Ethan took one last moment alone with the car. Phoenix sat cooling in the twilight, its red paint seeming to glow in the fading light. Ethan ran his hand along the hood, feeling the metal warm from the day's work. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being worth saving, for teaching us that broken things deserve second chances, for bringing people together who needed each other even if they didn't know it yet." The car didn't answer, but Ethan hadn't expected it to. Some conversations were meant to be one-sided. Some gratitude was too big for words. The Foundation launched 6 weeks later at an event held in the Hamilton Museum, with Phoenix as the centerpiece. 200 people attended: students, educators, engineers, journalists, and community members who'd followed the story from the beginning. Isabella gave a speech about innovation and access. Sophia presented her research findings. And Ethan, who hated public speaking, talked about what it meant to protect work that mattered even when powerful people wanted it buried. "Martin Voss built something extraordinary," he said, standing before a room full of strangers who'd become interested in his story. But it took a community to bring it back to life. That's the lesson here. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when people who care about something bigger than themselves decide to protect it together. He talked about Dennis's craftsmanship and Sophia's research, and Isabella's strategic thinking, and Noah's simple reminder that some things deserve second chances. He talked about misses, Henderson bringing casseroles and Marcus bringing honesty, and the neighborhood showing up when it mattered. He talked about how a $100 car had taught him that value wasn't measured in money, that worth was something you created through dedication and community, and refusing to give up when everyone said you should. The audience stood and applauded when he finished, and Ethan felt something in his chest that might have been pride, or might have been relief, or might have been both. He'd said what needed to be said. The rest would take care of itself. Applications for the Foundation's first scholarship opened that night. By morning, they'd received over 200 submissions from students who wanted to study automotive engineering but couldn't afford traditional programs. Isabella had estimated they might support 20 students in the first year. Looking at the applications, reading stories of kids who reminded him of himself at their age, Ethan knew they'd have to find a way to support more. "We need additional funding," he said to Isabella the next morning over their now traditional coffee in his garage. "Already on it. I've reached out to 3 other manufacturing companies about matching grants. 2 are interested. We should be able to support at least 40 students in year 1. 40 students. That's a lot of lives changed." That's the point. Isabella set down her coffee and looked at him seriously. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually consider it instead of reflexively saying no." He felt his shoulders tense. "What?" "I want to be more involved in your life. And Noah's life. not as a benefactor or a neighbor, but as someone who cares about you both. She took a breath. I'm not good at this kind of conversation. I build companies and negotiate deals, but personal relationships are harder. So I'm just going to say it directly. I've fallen for you, for both of you. And I want to know if there's any possibility you feel the same way. Ethan felt his heart rate spike. He'd been carefully not examining his feelings about Isabella, afraid that acknowledging them would complicate everything. But she'd just laid her cards on the table with the same directness she brought to everything else, and she deserved honesty in return. I'm terrified, he said finally. Sarah's been gone 3 years and I still miss her every day. The idea of moving forward, of being with someone else, feels like I'm somehow betraying her memory. I understand that. I'm not asking you to forget her or replace her. I'm asking if there's room in your life for something new alongside what you had. Noah loves you. He talks about you constantly. You've become this huge presence in his life. And if this goes wrong, then we handle it like adults who care about a kid's well-being more than our own egos. Ethan, I'm not suggesting we rush into anything. I'm suggesting we stop pretending that what's been growing between us isn't real. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd transformed from the ice queen across the street into a person he trusted more than almost anyone. Someone who showed up consistently, who fought for what mattered, who'd integrated herself into his life so thoroughly that imagining her not being there felt impossible. Yeah, he said quietly. I feel the same way. I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Isabella's smile was radiant. So we try this? See where it goes? We try this, slowly, with lots of communication and making sure Noah's okay every step of the way. I can do slow. I'm good at strategic planning. Everything's a business negotiation with you, Isaiah. Not everything, just the important things. She leaned forward and kissed him, brief and gentle, and it felt both new and familiar at the same time, like something that had been building for months finally finding its natural expression. They told Noah that evening, nervous about his reaction. The kid looked between them with those two knowing eyes, then shrugged. Took you long enough. I've been waiting for you two to figure it out. You knew? Ethan asked, stunned. Dad, everyone knew. Even Mrs. Henderson knew, and she's like 100 years old. Noah grinned. Can I call her Isabella, or do I have to call her something else now? You can call me Isabella, she said, laughing. Nothing else changes except we're honest about caring about each other. Cool. Can we order pizza? 8. And just like that, the major relationship conversation was over, reduced to a request for dinner. Ethan looked at Isabella, who was trying not to laugh, and felt something unknot in his chest that had been tense for 3 years. Life moved forward. People healed. New families formed alongside old memories. Everything could coexist if you let it. The Foundation's first cohort started that spring. 40 students from 18 states, all of them brilliant and broke and hungry to learn. They spent their weekends at the shop, working on projects under Dennis's supervision, learning engineering principles through hands-on work. Noah helped teach some of the younger students, becoming a peer mentor at 9 years old because he'd been present for every step of Phoenix's restoration and understood the work in his bones. Phoenix itself became a teaching tool. Students studied its engineering, learned fabrication techniques from rebuilding components, understood design philosophy through examining Martin Voss's solutions to complex problems. The car gave rides at events, demonstrated suspension systems at educational workshops, and generally proved that innovation was meant to be used rather than preserved in static display. A year after finishing the restoration, Ethan stood in his expanded shop. He'd taken Isabella up on her offer to negotiate the lease on the adjacent building, surrounded by students working on various projects. Some were rebuilding engines. Others were designing custom suspension systems. A few were using computer modeling to test aerodynamic theories. The noise was constant and chaotic, and exactly what the space should sound like. Isabella found him standing in the doorway, watching everything with satisfaction that felt almost overwhelming. You did this, she said, slipping her hand into his. You took a $100 car and turned it into something that's changing 40 lives every year. We did this. All of us together. Fine, we did this. But you started it by being stubborn enough to keep a car that everyone said you should sell. Best $100 I ever spent. They stood together, watching the controlled chaos of young engineers learning their craft. And Ethan thought about how far he'd come from that night in the salvage yard. He'd been looking for something then, even if he didn't know what. Something to make life feel like more than just survival. He'd found it in the most unlikely place, a rusted wreck that became a symbol of resurrection. A community that formed around protecting what mattered. A woman who pushed him to be better than he thought he could be. A son who never stopped believing that broken things deserve second chances. Martin Voss had built Phoenix to prove engineering could be revolutionary. He'd succeeded, but probably not in the way he'd imagined. The car's real revolution wasn't in its suspension design or custom fabrication. It was in reminding people that worth wasn't determined by corporations or market forces. That ordinary people could protect extraordinary things. That communities mattered more than capital. 3 years after buying Phoenix, Ethan understood what Sarah had meant about the right thing, usually being the hard thing. Keeping the car had been hard. Restoring it had been harder. Building something meaningful from the attention it generated had been hardest of all. But hard things were what gave life texture and meaning. Easy things disappeared from memory. Hard things became the stories you told, the pride you carried, the foundation you built your life on. Noah appeared at his elbow, grease on his hands, and satisfaction on his face. "Dad, I just helped Marcus's daughter rebuild a carburetor. She's going to enter the design competition next month." "That's great, buddy." "It's because of Phoenix, because we didn't give up when people said we should. Now all these other people aren't giving up either." "Yeah, that's exactly right." Isabella squeezed his hand once, and Ethan squeezed back, and they stood together watching their strange, beautiful, hard-won life unfold in front of them. Some broken things deserved second chances. Some rusted wrecks contained revolutions. Some communities formed around protecting what mattered. Some families were built from choice instead of blood. Some stories started with questionable decisions in salvage yards and ended with foundations that changed lives. And some single fathers who thought they were just surviving discovered they were actually building something extraordinary, one difficult choice at a time. Phoenix sat in the corner of the shop, gleaming red under the work lights, no longer a relic, but a promise. A reminder that resurrection was possible. That rising from ash wasn't just mythology, but something real people did through dedication and community and refusing to accept that brokenness was permanent. The car had taught them all how to fly. And that, Ethan thought, watching his son teach another young person how to use a torque wrench properly, was worth far more than any amount of money ever could be.